Chapter 3867. In the first month of last year, Old Six and Xiao Yi received a call and left in a hurry. Since she knew Old Six's identity, she probably guessed Xiao Yi's departure as well. That would explain why she gave up what's near for what's far away. Commander-in-Chief Xia couldn't help but purse his lips. His dignified expression became even more serious. This matter was a bit difficult to handle. Letting Xiao Yi go was equivalent to putting his own family in danger. There were already 2 juniors in danger. If Xiao Yi was added, Commander-in-Chief Xia's lips were almost pressed into a straight line. He was still worried about one thing. If Xiao Yi also realized why Yijin gave up what's near for what's far away and sent her a text message, based on Xiao Yi's personality, she definitely wouldn't sit back and do nothing. This was even more troublesome. Commander-in-Chief Xia felt troubled because as long as Yi Qian requested to go to Yun Province, he couldn't refuse. In his heart, Yi Qian was indeed the best person to rescue Zhou Yijin. But before that, he first had to figure out why Yijin went missing and who dared to kidnap a Chinese soldier. The phone on the desk buzzed and the screen flashed, indicating that there was an incoming call. Commander-in-Chief Xia, who was caught in a dilemma, saw the incoming call and sighed softly. At this moment, he had a premonition that Yi Qian had figured out the crux of the matter. When the call went through, Yi Qian voiced her suspicions one by one. Commander-in-Chief Xia could only smile bitterly. His premonition had become reality. She really did figure out the crux of the matter. Commander-in-Chief Xia took out a ballpoint pen from the pen holder and wrote a few words on a piece of paper and pushed it to Major General Yang. After Major General Yang read it, he shook his head and sighed. He also took out a pen from the pen holder and wrote on the paper, "Xiao Yi is smart. I've already experienced it." Since Yi Qian had already figured it out, then what should he do? "Uncle, Yijin only sent me a text message asking for help because she trusts me. I beg you to let me stay here and wait for orders. If there's a need, I can act immediately." Yi Qian did not immediately mention that she had to go to Yun Province. She knew that this kind of transfer would not be as simple as when she was in school. After all, she was currently studying in a basic unit of a regiment in Nanguang Province. If she really wanted to go over, she would have to go through the company first. However, she really wanted to go. She really wanted to go. "Little Yi, I can understand your feelings." Now that Yijin's whereabouts were unknown, the Yun Province's military was doing their best to investigate. They must first find out who dared to kidnap our soldiers before they can make further plans. Don't worry, with the help of Yun Province's military, Yijin will definitely be fine. I also promise that if I really need you to come over, I will inform you immediately. Yi Qian knew that it would be troublesome to transfer between military regions, so she could only wait patiently. Other than that, she had no other choice. However, she knew that Yijin wanted her to go. Yijin believed that she would definitely be able to save her. Otherwise, Yijin would not have sent her such an important message asking for help. Zhou Yijin had indeed placed her hopes of survival on Yi Qian. Just as Commander-in-Chief Xia had guessed, Yi Qian and Xia Jinyuan had both left their family Xia last year in the first month of last year. That was when she guessed that her Aunt Lu's identity was a little unusual. When she finally managed to get the phone that she had hidden in her military boots, it was not that she did not think of her own brother and her cousins who had family Xia, but in the end, she still sent the word help to Yi Qian. It was not for any other reason, but because of Yi Qian's special identity, he would be able to quickly know that she was in danger. Chapter 3868. More importantly, she believed that Aunt Lu would definitely come to save her. Out of her biological brothers and cousins, only Brother Six could possibly come to save her. However, Brother Six hadn't been home for a year, so she couldn't count on him. In that case, it could only be Aunt Lu. Since Aunt Lu could travel with Brother Six, it was more likely that Aunt Lu would come to save her personally. Zhou Yijin, whose nose was covered by the chloroform, woke up. The first thing she wanted to do was to observe her surroundings. However, she was blindfolded, so she gave up. Then, she tried to think of a way to escape, but her hands and feet were tied. There was no way she could save herself. In the end, she realized that she couldn't save herself, so she could only ask for help. Thanks to the environment she grew up in, she didn't panic when she was kidnapped. After analyzing the most effective way to ask for help, she only had time to send the word help to Yi Qian. Just as she turned off her phone and hid it in her military boots, one of her comrades who was kidnapped with her let out a muffled sound, telling her that someone was coming. Outside the rusty iron door, there was the sound of iron chains twitching. Then the iron door was kicked open. Zhou Yijin pretended to be very scared and kept shrinking back. She put her phone, which she didn't have time to hide, into the haystack. The moment the message was sent, Zhou Yijin didn't panic like she did when she was kidnapped. She calmed down and her mind was very clear. Even though she was very scared, she knew to cooperate obediently and didn't resist. She believed that with her Aunt Lu's intelligence, she would definitely know that she was in danger and needed help. Zhou Yijin, whose eyes were also blindfolded, retreated to the cold corner of the wall when she heard the muffled sounds of her comrades struggling. She had nowhere else to go. Her collar was roughly twisted up, and then the ropes that tied her feet were cut. She was pushed out of the storeroom that was filled with the damp smell of cow dung. After being pushed out of the storeroom, Zhou Yijin was separated from her comrades. For the next few hours, she was in a bumpy car. She knew that she was getting further and further away from the Border Defense Company. She was so far away that she didn't know where she was being taken. She only knew that she was in a car the whole time. Other than that, it was very quiet around her. Her mouth was stuffed. Her hands and feet were tied. She curled up in the car. Zhou Yijin, who was shaking, closed her eyes and let herself sleep for a while. Half an hour after they left, the Cloud Leopard Commando team sent by the Yun Province military region found a phone in the pasture of the black-boned sheep at the border. After checking and confirming that the phone belonged to the missing female soldier, Zhou Yijin, they sent a message to her mailbox. The phone was found, but the person was not there. The Cloud Leopard Commandos continued their search. The Border Defense Team received the latest news. When Suyu received the news, he stood there quietly for at least 5 minutes. Then, he called the Yun Province's military district. Commander-in-Chief Xia received a call from the Yun Province's military district again. It had been 2 hours since Zhou Yijin sent Yi Qian a message for help. He stood there and answered the phone. He quietly listened to the latest report from the Yun Province's military district and their next deployment. After a long time, Commander-in-Chief Xia pursed his lips and said in a deep voice, "Other than this, is there no other way?" His deep voice contained the dignity of someone who had been in a high position for a long time. The leader of the Yun Province's military district looked even more solemn. "Yes, Commander-in-Chief. We've been discussing this problem for half an hour. Time is of the essence, so we can only report to you first and see if it's possible." Chapter 3869. The result of their half an hour of discussion was to send his future daughter-in-law to risk her life again. "Get Suyu from the narcotics division to call me. I'll wait for his call." After Commander-in-Chief Xia finished speaking, he slammed the phone down. Obviously, he was a little angry. Yi Qian, and Xiao Yi again. Other than Xiao Yi, he didn't believe that there was no one else who could do it. His only son was facing a life and death crisis. Was he going to send his daughter-in-law into the tiger's den and fight with the tiger? At this moment, Commander-in-Chief Xia was just an ordinary father. He was worried about the life and death of his only son, Xia Jinyuan, and his niece's whereabouts were unknown. Now, with his daughter-in-law, Yi Qian, there were 3 members of his family Xia who were all facing a life and death crisis. Even though he was used to big storms and knew that being a soldier wasn't easy, he still couldn't remain calm at this moment. This worry, that worry, and now there was another one. They were going to push him into the tiger's den again. Commander-in-Chief Xia suppressed his anger and sat back in his office chair, waiting for Suyu from the narcotics division to call him. Suyu first received a call from the Yun Province military region, telling him in advance that Commander-in-Chief Xia was angry. He then dialed the military headquarters switchboard and transferred the call to the Commander-in-Chief Xia's office. Suyu knew that his hands were sweating. Under normal circumstances, something like this wouldn't alarm the Commander-in-Chief Xia. It was probably because one of the missing female soldiers was Commander-in-Chief Xia's niece. As an elder, Commander-in-Chief Xia naturally had to pay attention to this matter at all times. In order to rescue Commander-in-Chief Xia's niece as soon as possible, and based on the clues provided by the informant, he made this deployment. He just didn't know why Commander-in-Chief Xia was angry. Was he angry because they hadn't found the female soldier, Zhou Yijin? Or was he angry because of their deployment? Su Yu, whose palms were sweating, had a chance to speak directly with the Commander-in-Chief Xia for the first time. When he heard a rather dignified voice coming from the phone, Su Yu's heart skipped a beat. "Hello, Commander-in-Chief. I'm Su Yu from the Yun Province Border Narcotics Division." The phone call between Su Yu and Commander-in-Chief Xia took a long time. After 10 minutes, Commander-in-Chief Xia hung up the phone call. The Commander-in-Chief Xia's call. The other party's explanation was reasonable. Xiao Yi, there was indeed no other person. A female soldier, eh? Not only did the Yun province need to have a female special force, the other military regions needed to have one, especially in the border regions like the Yun province, the Tibetan region, and the border regions. The establishment of a female special force must be put on record. This was an urgent task. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Yi Qian, who had been waiting for a long time, received a call from Commander-in-Chief Xia. She had been waiting all this time. When she saw the call, she jumped out of bed. Her movements were so big that Ding Ling, who was taking a clinical nap, was shocked. She opened her eyes and asked, "What's wrong? What's wrong? What happened?" "Nothing. I'm going out to take a call." After putting on her shoes, Yi Qian didn't even put on her jacket. She picked up her phone and rushed out of the dormitory. In a few strides, she rushed from the 4th floor to the rooftop of the 6th floor. Then, she picked up the call. Chapter 3870. Commander-in-Chief Xia's deep voice sounded. Yun Province's military and border defense police have confirmed that the person who kidnapped Yijin and the other female soldier is the Burmese mafia boss, Qin Mong Sain, whom our country has been trying to get rid of for a long time. Qin Mong Sain hates our border defense police to the core. He has plotted to take revenge on our armed police and killed 3 of our armed police. Our country has also been looking for him. The border defense police suspect that they kidnapped 2 of our soldiers in order to make a deal with the armed police in exchange for the drugs seized by our armed police. Our country will not return the drugs. We will only stall for time. Also, the reason why Qin Mong Sain have been active in Myanmar is because of the support of the Burmese military. Our soldiers were kidnapped this time, but the Burmese military was not alerted. Yijin's life is not in danger at the moment. The Yun Province's Cloud Leopard Commando team is secretly following her to ensure the safety of Yijin and the other female soldier. Along the way, we also found that Qin Mong Sain did not stop at kidnapping 2 of our soldiers. They are still planning to kidnap more of our soldiers. Xiao Yi, not only do we want to save the 2 female soldiers, but we also plan to— Commander-in-Chief Xiao paused for a moment before continuing. "We also plan to infiltrate Qin Mong Sain and execute a decapitation operation. Xiao Yi, if you go, you will be the sharpest knife in our hands. The decapitation operation will be carried out by you. The danger you will face is unpredictable. Xiao Yi, you have to think carefully." According to the frontline intelligence, they learned that Qin Mong Sain was still planning to kidnap our soldiers. After a discussion, the Yun Province's military and the Border Defense Police Detachment decided to send a soldier to take the risk and get close to Qin Mong Sain before killing them. Not only would this serve as a deterrent, but it would also let other drug kings know the consequences of provoking the Chinese side. If you dare to kidnap our soldiers, then our side can directly take your life. The wind on the rooftop was strong, but Yi Qian was exceptionally calm. He answered without hesitation, "I've made up my mind. I could take action at any time." On the phone, Commander-in-Chief Xia was silent for a few seconds before continuing. "Okay, I've already bought you a ticket. I'll give you 10 minutes to pack up. After 10 minutes, your company commander will personally drive you to the airport. Yun Province's military is currently in contact with your company. You can pack your luggage and immediately depart for Yun province. Yes, Yi Qian responded. His clear voice carried an indomitable sharpness, like a sword that could cut through the darkness. His entire body was cold. Very quickly, the battalion commander of the 3rd Battalion received a call from the Yun Province Military District. The cadet Yi Qian, who had come to the company to study, needed to depart for Yun Province immediately. The transfer order was directly issued by military headquarters. Since the transfer order had been issued by military headquarters, the battalion commander of the 3rd Battalion didn't dare to ask for a reason. He followed the military's instructions and had the commander of the 2nd Company personally drive Yi Qian to the airport. Ding Ling, who was in the same dorm as Yi Qian, was a little confused when she saw him pack up after taking a phone call. It's not time for us to go back to school yet. Why are you packing? No, I have something to take care of here. I'll leave the company for a few days first. I'll return when I'm done. Yi Qian didn't pack everything. He didn't even need to bring his military uniform. He only needed to bring 2 sets of training uniforms. Chapter 3871. Ding Ling originally wanted to ask where he was going to deal with the matter, but when she saw the unfamiliar coldness between Yi Qian's eyebrows, she swallowed her words and said softly, "Be careful." Yi Qian's expression was cold and sharp. She didn't dare to ask too much. After packing her luggage, Yi Qian zipped up her travel bag and smiled at Ding Ling. She left the dormitory with 2 sets of military training and 2 sets of underwear without looking back. Yi Qian took 6 minutes to finish packing her luggage after hanging up the phone. 6 minutes later, she went downstairs and walked across the field to the jeep parked at the entrance of the barracks. When the 2nd Company's commander saw Yi Qian walking over, he quickly started the car. When Yi Qian opened the door and got in, the 2nd Company's commander even tightened his grip on the steering wheel. They really couldn't keep Yi Qian here. Orders for transfers were directly issued from the military. When the 2nd Battalion's commander, who still hadn't settled his marriage this year, received a personal call from Commander-in-Chief Xia, his first reaction was to think that he had met with a swindler. Fortunately, he kept his cool and didn't immediately question him. Otherwise, he would have been beaten up. How dare he call the Commander-in-Chief a swindler? Did he want to rebel? Even the Commander-in-Chief was involved. The 2nd Company's commander and Yi Qian had some communication difficulties. Yi Qian was thinking about Zhou Jin. She only exchanged a few words with the commander when they got in the car. When they arrived at the airport, the commander personally took her luggage from the backseat and stood in front of Yi Qian. He smiled and said, "Yi Qian, your studies aren't over yet. You can only leave the company on the 12th of the 1st lunar month. Don't forget." He didn't know why Yi Qian was going to Yun Province, but since the commander-in-chief had personally called the barracks, it was obvious that her trip wasn't simple. He didn't say anything else and just told her that all the soldiers in the company were waiting for her safe return. Yi Qian took her luggage and nodded. She saluted the commander and said, "Commander, don't worry. I will definitely rush back to write the report." "Ha, that's right. Don't forget that you still have a report to write. If you don't write well, I won't write a few good words for you back to the military academy." This female student from Yi Qian was quite interesting. In less than half a month, she already knew that this female soldier would not be an ordinary person in the future. Now that they were all extraordinary people, they would be even more so in the future. If even the military took notice of him, he was more than just impressive. At 4:40 in the afternoon, Yi Qian boarded the plane to Yun Province and arrived in Changshui 2 hours later. At 7 o'clock in the evening, Yi Qian walked out of Changshui Airport. The Yun Province Border Defense Department had already sent a car to wait for him. This was Yi Qian's 2nd visit to Yun Province. The first time, he had accompanied diplomat Qin Xiao. This time, he had come alone. There were 2 armed police in the car. They were both veterans who had served at the border of Yun Province for more than 6 years. They were also very familiar with Qin Mong's saying. As soon as Yi Qian got into the car, they took the opportunity to tell Yi Qian about Qin Mong's saying in detail. Yi Qian held a photo in his hand. In the photo was Qin Mong's saying, who was wearing a military uniform with a rifle in his hand. Behind him stood a group of subordinates who were also holding rifles. In the corner of the photo there was also a mortar mount. Just from the photo, it was obvious that Qin Mong Sane had a certain amount of firepower. In the car, the armed police said to Yi Qian in a low voice, "We have been looking for his base, but we haven't been able to find it. In addition, we don't know which Burmese military force is supporting him, so we haven't dared to join forces with the Burmese military to eliminate him. Qin Mong Sane also knows that we are determined to eliminate him. Therefore, he has only been active in Myanmar and has never crossed our borders." Chapter 3872. As the core figure of this operation, Yi Qian explained the entire battle plan very clearly. Sometimes they would even ask Yi Qian if he understood, and if there was anything he didn't understand that needed to be explained in more detail. They all knew how important Yi Qian was, so they didn't dare to be careless. This time, you only have one main mission, which is to get close to Qin Mong Sane and assassinate them in secret. After you succeed, the Cloud Leopard Commando team will be outside to escort you out of Myanmar. Yi Qian, this mission is very dangerous. You will be fighting alone to complete the mission. When you escape, the Cloud Leopard Commando team can only support you from the periphery. They won't be able to go deep to support your retreat. Previously, we planned to send a male soldier from the Cloud Leopard Commando team to pretend to be kidnapped by Qin Mong Sane and then find an opportunity to assassinate him. However, Qin Mong Sane only chose female soldiers to kidnap our country soldiers. Unfortunately, the Cloud Leopard Commando team hasn't recruited any female soldiers yet, and we don't have any female soldiers who can go deep into the enemy's territory. Later, our commander soon mentioned you. Yi Qian looked up from the photo and looked at the armed police officer who was talking to her. "Is the commander, Su, you're talking about Captain Su Yu?" "That's right. Commander Su said that as long as we mention him to you, you will definitely know who he is. Commander Su said that 4 years ago, our comrades from the Border Drug Enforcement team worked with you. It was all thanks to you that we were able to kill all the fugitives." She didn't expect to meet Su Yu's soldiers, who she had worked with in Australia 4 or 5 years ago during a survival mission at the border. They had worked together with the 6th Border Patrol team to eliminate a drug production team. At that time, a scout was sacrificed. It was also the first time she had encountered a comrade who sacrificed himself. Because of this, her mood was slightly affected. It was Captain Xia who comforted her and made her feel better. This time, they had miraculously bumped into each other again. It had to be said that she had some fate with Commander Su's soldiers. The person who received Yi Qian was an old armed police officer, but he did not know about the cooperation between Yi Qian and Su Yu. He only knew that this female student in front of him was quite powerful. She was a sniper and had strong individual combat ability. When Su Min mentioned her, he said that he could not find a second female soldier who was qualified for this mission other than her. Su Yu's corps reported this to the Yun province's military, and the military mentioned it to the military. In the end, the person in charge of the military nodded, and it was time for him and his comrades to come to the airport. Yi Qian did not think that Su Yu would still remember her, and even think of letting her join this operation. This time, it was all thanks to Head Commander Su that he remembered her. Otherwise, she would not have been part of this operation. She had to thank Chief Commander Su properly. Yi Qian smiled and asked, "Where's Commander Su now? Can I see him from here?" "Yes." Chief Commander Su said that he was deeply sorry for not apologizing to you in person last time. This time, he will personally drive you over. Probably because they knew that the place they were sending Yi Qian to was to lure the people from Qin Mong Sane to kidnap Yi Qian. The anti-drug police officer's voice became much softer. There was even a hint of guilt in his eyes. For a matter of life and death like this, the male soldiers should be at the forefront. In the end, it was the female soldiers who were at the forefront. The male soldiers more or less felt a little guilty. Yi Qian did not think much of it. Male and female soldiers were the same. Why would they differentiate between men and women when they wore military uniforms? They were all soldiers. Chapter 3873. While she was heading to a border defense company to meet with Su Yu, Du Kaiwei, who was far away in the capital, flew into a rage at his sister Du Jiai for the first time. The reason was that Du Jiai had eavesdropped on his conversation with the commander of the 3rd Battalion. Du Jiai, I think you're getting worse and worse. You don't even have the most basic etiquette. What have you been doing after leaving the army for so long? Didn't you say you were going to enter the Ministry of Foreign Affairs? What about your grades? What happened? What the hell are you doing day after day? Although Du Kaiwei was a little narrow-minded and would always protect his family regardless of whether they were right or wrong, he was still a soldier after all. Moreover, he was a regiment commander, so he had to set an example everywhere and pay special attention to the confidentiality of the troops. But he didn't expect that he had to be on guard at home like an enemy. He even hid in the study to answer calls from the army, but his sister was eavesdropping. This time, Du Kaiwei was so angry that his face turned green. If word got out, he would have to change his regimental commander. Du Jiai, who heard the name Yi Qian, couldn't help but eavesdrop. She didn't expect to be yelled at by her brother. She was stunned for a moment and didn't react for a long time. Her eyes were wide open and her face was full of disbelief. Downstairs, Madame Li, who was playing with her grandson, heard her eldest son fly into a rage upstairs. She asked her eldest daughter-in-law to go up and take a look. Yin, go up and see what's wrong with the eldest son. Why is he so angry during the New Year? Du Kaiwei's wife, Tianyun, glanced upstairs but didn't go up. Instead, she smiled and said, "It's okay, Mom. Don't you know that Kaiwei has a bad temper? He'll be fine after a while. You don't have to worry." She then smiled at her son and said, "Dandan, don't you want to go next door to play with your friends? How about you go with Grandma?" Tianya knew that her husband was angry at her sister-in-law, Du Jiai. Although she didn't know why at this time, it was better not to get involved. She was the sister-in-law, and it wouldn't be good for her to persuade either side, so it was better to avoid it. Knowing her mother-in-law's temper, Tianyun simply asked her son, who was already in the 1st grade, to distract her mother-in-law. Madame Li's anger disappeared little by little with her grandson's return. Now that her grandson said he wanted to go next door, she didn't care about the quarrel upstairs. She was ready to take her grandson to visit. However, she was still worried. When they reached the door, Madame Li said, "Go up and keep an eye on them. Kaiwei has a bad temper and has been in the army for a long time. Don't use the tactics of the army at home. Also, remind them that they still have to go to your grandmother's house for dinner later. Don't fight until their faces are red. Don't you feel ashamed when you go out?" Playing. After her mother-in-law left, Tianyun's face turned cold. She had never liked this sister-in-law. She was very scheming, but she always pretended to be magnanimous. In the 1st year of her marriage, she suffered 2 big losses in the hands of her sister-in-law. Later, fortunately, her husband was transferred to Nangguang. She did not say anything and insisted on following the army rather than living in the military compound. She did not want to see her sister-in-law's face, which was two-faced in front of her face and behind her back. Chapter 38-74. Tianyun knew that her sister-in-law was not someone to be trifled with. She must have done something to provoke her husband, who had always been protective of her. She must have done something that crossed her husband's bottom line. Her mother-in-law asked her to go up and take a look. She couldn't wait for her husband to scold her for a while. However, if she didn't show up, she would still be caught red-handed by her sister-in-law. Thus, Tianyun raised her voice downstairs and said, "It's the New Year. If you have anything to say, say it properly. If you really can't do it, close the door and go into the room. Don't let anyone hear you. Those who don't know might think that there's a fight in the house." Du Jiai was a prideful person. When she heard her sister-in-law's voice, her face immediately turned red. She snapped out of her daze and jumped into the study like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. At the same time, she pushed her older brother, who was standing at the door, into the study. "I didn't do anything. Big brother, aren't you making a mountain out of a molehill? What did you say to your platoon commander? Even if I eavesdropped, what could I have heard? There's still a door between us." Other than hearing Yi Qian's name, I didn't hear anything else clearly. "I don't know what you said to your platoon commander. I didn't hear anything, and you even scolded me. Big brother, you're being too unreasonable. After entering the study, Du Jiayi reprimanded Du Kaiwei for being unreasonable and not scolding her. Du Kaiwei was so angry that he laughed. You heard Yi Jian's name and knew that it was the battalion commander of my regiment who called. You said you didn't hear it. Then how did you know it was the battalion commander of my regiment who called? Du Jiayi, was your brain bitten by a pig? The more he spoke, the angrier Du Kaiwei got. He slammed his palm on the desk. The sound was so loud that Du Jiayi's heart skipped a beat. Her little face tensed up even more. Seeing Du Kaiwei's face darken, Du Jiayi gritted her teeth and didn't dare talk back. She bit her lip and apologized unhappily. I'm sorry, big brother. I didn't do it on purpose. It was because I heard Yi Qian's name that I couldn't control myself. It's true. I really didn't hear anything else. I only know that Yi Qian was directly demoted by the military. I want to know where she went, but you didn't tell me. Fortunately, he didn't say anything. While Jiayi was apologizing, Du Kaiwei, whose complexion was gradually turning for the better, harumphed loudly. He pulled the desk and chair over and sat down. With a stern expression, he stared at Du Jiayi and said in a deep voice, Jiayi, if you're blaming Yi Qian because of Yi Ying, then you're wrong. Although Yi Qian and Yi Ying are cousins, their personalities are completely different. Yi Ying wanted to use underhanded means to climb up the social ladder, but Yi Qian is different. She's outstanding in both ability and academics. She didn't need to resort to underhanded means to climb up the social ladder. She relied on herself to reach a height that even you can't reach. She's an outstanding military academy student. Previously, you said that you were stepping on Yi Ying's shoulders to pass the college entrance exams. You also said that you were deliberately framing Yi Ying so that you could steal the limelight. I've also observed Yi Qian during this period of time. She's not the kind of person you described her to be. So, Jiayi, you really need to change your temper sometimes. Don't act like you're the best. Let's not talk about anything else. Let's talk about little uncle. Wasn't he glorious before? Didn't he bring glory to the Li family? But now, he's become a disgrace to the Li family. I don't even dare to mention the Li family. Chapter 3875. Du Kaiwei had always been good to his sister. Previously, he didn't have a good chat with Du Jiayi because he didn't know much about Yi Qian. This time, Du Kaiwei wanted to have a good chat with her. He said earnestly, this time, if Mom didn't say that she wanted to go back to the Li family to visit Grandma, I wouldn't have wanted to go. Jiayi, you're not young anymore. You're already 25 years old. You can't throw a tantrum like before. I can't indulge you like before and let you do whatever you want. Because of little uncle, our Du family has been targeted by the Military Commission for Discipline Inspection. Do you still think that the family isn't messy enough and want to make more trouble? Look at Dad. He can't even go home during the new year. He's already the deputy chief of staff and a major general, but because of little uncle's incident, Du Kaiwei, who had said everything in one breath, couldn't continue. The deputy chief of staff Du's position in the general staff department was a little awkward. He had less and less power, and his words carried less and less weight. A few days ago, when they were chatting, the deputy chief of staff Du even told his eldest son, Du Kaiwei, that he wanted to leave the general staff department. This scared Du Kaiwei. He was only a regiment commander now. If the deputy chief of staff Du in the general staff department retired, there would be no one in the court. It would be very inconvenient for him to do anything. Because of this, Du Kaiwei even chatted with the deputy chief of staff Du for a long time before he found out why his father wanted to retire. A large part of the reason was his family. Today, Du Jiayi happened to bump into the muzzle of the gun. Du Kaiwei, who had wanted to chat with his sister, suddenly exploded. He knew whether Du Jiayi heard him or not and how much she heard. When they talked about the main points, he didn't say much. He only answered with, okay. When he mentioned Yi Qian's name, he just wanted to confirm that the military didn't make a mistake. Who knew that Du Jiayi would hear it? Fortunately, it was a habit of hers. Even at home, she did not mention anything important, so Du Jiayi did not find out where Yi Qian had been transferred to. Du Kaiwei's original intention was to get Du Jiayi to let go of her prejudices against Yi Qian. However, the more he said this, the more Du Jiayi became prejudiced against Yi Qian. When she heard this, her eyes widened even more, and she said, "Brother, don't tell me you're also attracted by Yi Qian's face. That's why you're speaking up for her." When Du Kaiwei heard this, he was so angry that he slammed the table and shouted, "You're getting more and more outrageous." Yi Qian relied on his genuine talent and genuine knowledge. Why is it that when it comes to you, it's changed? It's fine if you say this in front of me, but if you dare to say this in front of your sister-in-law, Du Jiayi, don't blame me for being rude when the time comes. This was great. It was as if he had reminded Du Jiayi of who she could borrow to teach Yi Qian a lesson. She did not want to find anyone else, but she could definitely find her sister-in-law. Du Jiayi's eyes flashed slightly, and she immediately lowered her head and obediently said, "Oh." In order not to let Du Kaiwei know what she was planning, she deliberately asked, "Brother, where exactly has Yi Qian been transferred to? Since you said that she's so capable, isn't it getting more and more high profile? Do you think you haven't been scolded enough just now? You still dare to ask?" Du Kaiwei glared at her. Since she already knew who she could borrow to deal with Yi Qian, Du Jiayi did not pursue the matter. She stuck out her tongue and said cheekily, "I don't dare to ask, I don't dare to ask. All right, brother, don't be angry, don't be angry." Chapter 3876. Du Jiayi knew very well how to appease her brother. She pouted and pretended to be aggrieved. "I admit that I have a deep prejudice against Yi Qian. Who asked her to offend me in the past? Also, all of you say that she's amazing. Huh, I'm not convinced. I think I'm much better than her. Also, brother, you can't expect me to get rid of my prejudice against her all of a sudden. It has to be done slowly. Don't worry, I won't say a word about your conversation with the army. I promise, I swear." She smiled and made faces. In the end, she even ran over to massage Du Kaiwei's shoulders. After a while, she coaxed Du Kaiwei until his face was no longer dark. She said dotingly, "Don't say that you're better than Yi Qian. She's a rare talent. All the soldiers in the company are convinced by her. You're indeed better than her in some aspects. For example, you're better than her in singing and dancing. I heard that Qin Xiu likes singing and dancing dramas. You should take a look at them and strive for a common language between the two of you. You have to take the Ministry of Foreign Affairs exam and have a common language. Qin Xiu is good. Brother supports you." At the mention of Qin Xiu, Du Jiayi pursed her lips. She had pursued Qin Xiu for so long. Even Qin Xiu's mother was happy for her to be with him. However, Qin Xiu kept his distance from her. From the beginning until now, he had not given her any hope. Du Jiayi sensed that his sister was in low spirits. He did not ask her to continue massaging his shoulders. He turned his chair to face Du Jiayi and asked with concern, "What's wrong? Is Qin Xiu not good?" "It's not that he's not good. He's very good. It's just that I've pursued him for so long and he hasn't said anything." "Hasn't said anything at all? That shouldn't be. Could it be that Qin Xiu has a girl he likes?" Hearing this, Du Jiayi's eyes flashed with ruthlessness. She had been chasing after him for so long, but there was no result. She was afraid that Qin Xiu was really in love with another woman like her brother said. Who dared to steal Du Jiayi's boyfriend? Qin Xiu is 28 years old today. It's normal for him to have a girl he likes. Even if he does, he needs the Qin family's approval. Since Qin Xiu's mother has always been happy for you to be with Qin Xiu, it can be seen that the girl that Qin Xiu likes has never been recognized by the Qin family. For a family like the Qin family, a marriage between two people really can't be decided by both parties' wishful thinking. The most important thing is that the two families are of equal social status and that the parents are satisfied. Jiayi, your chances of winning are still much higher. Even so, she didn't want the man she liked to like another girl. She absolutely wouldn't allow such a thing to happen. He had to investigate this thoroughly. Coincidentally, it was the Chinese New Year now. She could find out where Qin Xiu went during the Chinese New Year and which girls he met. This could basically determine who the girl that Qin Xiu liked was. At the mention of Qin Xiu, Du Jiayi forgot about her plan to scheme against Yi Qian. Instead, She was thinking about how to find out about Qin Xiu's activities over the past few days. Du Kaiwei naturally stood on his sister's side and even helped her investigate in secret. It was easy to find out where Qin Xiu had been over the past few days. After Mrs. Li brought her grandson home, she heard her daughter's reminder and called Mrs. Qin. The only answer she received was that Mrs. Qin went to the Fu family all day long to play chess with Old Master Fu. Old Master Fu didn't have any girls at home. Only then did Du Jia relax. In the afternoon, she happily accompanied Mrs. Li to the Li family's house. Du Kaiwei and his family also came along. Chapter 3877. In the car, Du Kaiwei received a few more calls from the army. There were no more reports about Yi Qian to him. When they arrived at the Li family, Du Jia forgot about her oath. She turned around and told Old Man Li and Old Madam Xiao Li that she was scolded by her brother because of an annoying outsider. Then, Old Madam Xiao Li asked who the outsider was. Du Jia directly said Yi Qian's name and explained in detail. Old Man Li, who wasn't paying attention, couldn't help but narrow his eyes. He found out that his son died at sea because it was related to the old case of a martyr surnamed Sunday. At the same time, he found out that this martyr surnamed son married into a family with the surname Yi. The person that his granddaughter disliked also had the surname Yi. He really didn't like this Yi and son surname. At that time, Old Man Li didn't think that Yi Qian was related to the martyr surnamed Sun. He only paid more attention because of the surname Yi. However, he didn't ask much. He only remembered Yi Qian in his heart and said, "In the future, don't interact with people with the surname Yi. Your mother was humiliated by two people with the surname Yi. It's obvious that people with the surname Yi don't have good characters." Old Man Li's words made Du Jia suddenly find support. She nodded in agreement. That's right. Grandpa is wise and powerful, unlike my brother, who easily forgives Yi Qian's actions just because he's good-looking. Sister-in-law, hurry up and control Big Brother. Don't let him be bewitched by other women. A basin of dirty water was casually poured on Yi Qian. Du Kaiwei, who had gone outside to answer the call, didn't know. He only knew that his wife, Tian Yun, looked a little forced when he came back. No one mentioned what Du Jia had said. It was only when Tian Yun mentioned it before going to bed that Du Kaiwei found out what Du Jia had said. His face was so gloomy that it could drip water. If it weren't for the fact that Du Jia stayed at the Li family's house for the night and didn't go back to the Du family's house, Du Kaiwei would have kicked the door and scolded her. It was already late at night in the capital, and countless people had already entered a deep sleep. Yi Qian departed from Buchangshui Airport and did not arrive at a certain border defense company until 11 in the morning. When Su Yu, the captain of the Border Defense Narcotics Division, saw Yi Qian push open the car door, he strode forward to greet him. He and Yi Qian had not seen each other since the end of the competition in Australia. When they met again, Su Yu looked at Yi Qian, who was dressed in his military uniform, and said emotionally, "At that time, you were still a junior high school student, and I was just an ordinary border police officer. When we met again, you had already become a soldier, and I was old." 6 or 7 years ago, Su Yu was 29 years old. Now that he was 35 or 36 years old, he definitely couldn't be considered old, but his eyes were sharper than before. When he swept his gaze over, he had an aura that made criminals panic. Yi Qian smiled and said, "I didn't think that I would have the opportunity to work with you a third time. This time, I'll have to trouble you again, Captain Su." I'm wrong. I'm the one who should be asking for your advice." Su Yu smiled as he looked at the girl who used to be thin and weak. Now, she had become a young soldier with sharp eyes. He could only sigh in his heart that time had passed too quickly. In the blink of an eye, the little girl who had shocked him greatly in the past had become a soldier who could fight alone. They didn't catch up. Yi Qian only stopped at the Border Defense Company for a short while before rushing overnight to a certain border checkpoint where people under Qin Mong Sane had appeared. Chapter 3878. The border checkpoint they went to did not have any performances planned. In order to cooperate with the anti-narcotics police and the Yun province military, The art troupe changed their performance plan and went to the checkpoint where Qin Mong Sain's subordinates appeared. To ensure the safety of the art troupe soldiers, all the soldiers knew that they were only going to cooperate with the decapitation operation. They were not allowed to leave the barracks alone. After the performance, all of them stayed in the barracks. No one was allowed to go out. There were very few female soldiers at the border and checkpoints. There were not many female soldiers in the communication company. Almost all of them were male soldiers. The art troupe went to the village to perform. Therefore, Qin Mong Sain, who knew that the art troupe was going to the border, targeted the female soldiers at the performance to threaten the Chinese side. He did not target the male soldiers because female soldiers were easier to control. It would also make the Chinese side more nervous. Yi Qian rushed to the company that was going to perform that night. She arrived at 3 in the morning. Then, she changed into a female soldier's uniform and sneaked into the art troupe. Su Yu, who had been sending Yi Jian over, quietly looked at the young soldier who had changed into his military uniform. His fingers trembled very, very slightly. He walked over, raised his hand, and adjusted Yi Qian's military cap. His eyes were slightly red. Yi Qian, I'm still waiting to work with you for the 4th time, the 5th time, countless times. Why did he let Yi Qian take the risk again? Because he really had no other choice. Zhou Yijin chose Yi Qian. Qin Mong Sain chose female soldiers, and Yi Qian became the most suitable female soldier. After adjusting Yi Qian's military cap and epaulettes, Su Yu took 3 steps back and saluted this young female soldier who dared to go into the tiger's den alone. Captain Su, wait for my good news. Yi Jian responded to Su Yu with a military salute. Then, she turned around and walked into the barracks without looking back. Su Yu stood where he was and watched the young and brave female soldier walk into the darkness. Then, she walked to where the street lamps were shining. Her slender figure was as straight as a spear until she was completely out of his sight. The information provided by the informant was correct. Qin Mong Sain no longer sent a child to pretend to be hit by a motorcycle. Instead, they sent a pregnant woman to pretend to be hit by a vehicle from the Arts and Crafts Regiment. Then, the entire vehicle was surrounded by residents. Yi Qian got out of the vehicle under such circumstances and sent the pregnant woman to the hospital with a male soldier from the Arts and Crafts Regiment. Seeing that they were about to reach the hospital near the checkpoint, the male soldiers received a call from their regiment and had no choice but to get out of the car and leave. Meanwhile, Yi Qian brought the pregnant woman to the hospital alone. All of this was being watched by the border and narcotics police. From a moment the pregnant woman pretended to be hit by a car, the police knew something was wrong. Sure enough, before the car reached the hospital, something happened at Yi Qian. The same trick that was used on Zhou Yijin was used on her again. The pregnant woman who leaned on her used chloroform to cover her nose before she fainted. Yi Qian had already memorized the features of the driver and the pregnant woman who pretended to be hit by a car. When she woke up, her eyes and legs were all tied up, but the silver wire was still in her hands. She didn't know where she was being taken. At this moment, Yi Qian had completely lost her sense of direction. She just followed wherever the other party took her. Qin Mong Sain knew that his subordinates had kidnapped another Chinese female soldier. He laughed heartily at Cobra and said, "Did you see that? This is what happens to the narcotics police when they anger me. I will use even crueler methods to repay them. I will let them know how powerful Qin Mong Sain is." Chapter 3879. Cobra had kidnapped government soldiers before, so he didn't find it strange. Plus, he didn't know much about the Chinese side. Cobra, who had always been smart and cunning, actually made a wrong judgment on this matter. This made him think that the Chinese border police force was just average, and not like what Luke said, the Chinese side was a restricted area for mercenaries. Therefore, Cobra thought that it wasn't difficult for him to enter the Chinese side. Luke and Xia Jinyuan, who had sneaked into the Chinese side illegally, hadn't returned safely. Cobra saw Qin Mong Sain's smug look and laughed with him. The kidnapping of the Chinese female soldiers was done beautifully. It would attract most of the attention of the Chinese border police force, thus reducing the danger to Luke and Xia. This was also why Cobra strongly supported Qin Mong Sain's kidnapping plan when he found out about it. A large net was spread out by the main forces of the Chinese side. They didn't have any contact with the Burmese military at all. They entered the tiger's den alone in the most dangerous way and went straight for Qin Mong Sain's head. Yi Qian was the most important member of this large net. She wasn't responsible for rescuing Zhou Yijin and the other female soldier, but was going straight for Qin Mong Sain's head. Would she be able to see Qin Mong Sain? No one knew. Why was Commander-in-Chief Xia angry? This was a gamble, and it was also a gamble with their lives. Commander-in-Chief Xia, who was angry, finally chose to understand. Because even if he knew that there wasn't a 100% chance, even if there was only a 1% chance, the Chinese side was willing to take a gamble. The other side had already shown their guns and dared to set a trap to kidnap Chinese soldiers. If the Chinese side continued to endure and only sent people to rescue the two female soldiers, it would undoubtedly increase the other side's arrogance. The Chinese side wouldn't provoke an irrational conflict, but in the face of the gun, the Chinese soldiers would definitely not remain silent. When it was time to show their swords, they had to show their swords. Yi Qian was this shining sword. Once the sword was unsheathed, even if there was only a 1% chance, they had to act. There was no backup, no retreat, only forward. A lone canopy traversed tens of thousands of miles, and this was the final farewell. Perhaps this time, it was the final farewell. Perhaps this time, the soldiers would not return, and their blood would dye the Green Mountains red. Commander-in-Chief Xia and Su Yu both knew about this. But Yi Qian did not think that this was a farewell. She was confident that she could escape, and she also believed that she could do it. The only thing she needed to worry about now was whether or not she would be able to see Qin Mong Sain. Only when she saw Qin Mong Sain would she have a chance to make a move. The criminals who were active at the border had their own way of survival. They would not pass through the checkpoints in the normal way. Instead, they would enter the villages at the border of two countries and then enter the territory of another country through the waterway. Zhou Yijin and another female soldier had used this method to leave China. Similarly, Yi Qian had also used this method to leave China. The people in the car had already noticed that Yi Qian had woken up. A woman sitting in the back pressed something hard against Yi Qian's waist and said coldly, "Right now, I'm holding a gun against you. If I find out that you don't cooperate, I will send all the bullets in the gun to your body." Her Mandarin was very standard. Those who didn't know would think that she was Chinese. Yi Qian was very familiar with this voice. It was the voice of the pregnant woman who had pretended to be injured and needed to be sent to the hospital. Now, the other party's voice was cold and gloomy. She didn't sound like someone who had a stomachache that needed to be checked at the hospital. The stomachache was fake, and so was the pregnancy. Chapter 3880. The man who was driving said a bunch of things in Burmese. The woman holding the gun fell silent, but the gun in her hand was pressed even harder against Yi Qian's waist. Yi Qian, who was blindfolded, did not know that the man sitting in the front passenger seat took out a syringe filled with medicine from a box and gave a look to the woman sitting in the back seat with Yi Qian. The moment his wrist was grabbed, Yi Qian seemed to have sensed something, and he panicked for a moment. "Yi Qian, this trip is very dangerous. You never know what the other party will do to you. They don't have any humanity, and they will do everything they can to protect their own interests. Once you become their captive, you will face many dangers. You must be mentally prepared. I'm guessing that you must have undergone captive training, but in reality, the difficulties that real captives face are many times crueler than what you face during training. You never know what they will do to you next. Male soldiers are often beaten, insulted, and injected with medicine. These are the most common methods used by captives. Female soldiers are far more common than these, and they may even be violated. If I didn't know that Qin Mong Sain wanted to kidnap female soldiers to make a deal with us, I definitely wouldn't have mentioned your name and let you face the danger of being a captive." That was what Su Yu said to Yi Qian in the car on the way to the border. Yi Qian was indeed mentally prepared, but when the sharp needle pierced into his skin, Yi Qian knew that he was not mentally prepared enough. Yi Qian, whose body gradually softened, heaved a sigh of relief. It was not the injection that she thought it would be. It was an anesthetic that would make her completely unconscious. Looking at the unconscious Yi Qian, the eyes of the women sitting in the car flashed with resentment. She wanted to torture this female soldier, but her companions in the car did not allow it. This made her very angry. Our boss still needs them to make a deal. If you torture her to death, there will only be one outcome for you. Keep your resentment. Now is not the time to kill them. The man sitting in the passenger seat put the syringe back into the box, turned around, and said to the dark-skinned woman with a slightly flat nose but delicate facial features, "We're only responsible for sending her there. We can't kill her directly. But my brother died in the hands of their country soldiers. If my brother was still alive, I wouldn't have been beaten by my mother. All the tragedies I'm experiencing now are caused by their country's soldiers." The woman roared in a low voice, and her delicate facial features instantly became ferocious. "It's their country caused me to lose my brother and caused my whole family to be in pain. I want to kill her. I want to kill her right now." She was so agitated that she could not hold of Yi Qian's right, of course. At this moment, Yi Qian was completely defenseless. Even the members of Cloud Leopard's commando team, who had been chasing after her, could not help her. Being captured meant that one's life was in the hands of others. Just like Yi Qian, no matter how good she was at fighting alone, she had lost the ability to fight back. This was the last thing Xia Jinyuan wanted to see. Unfortunately, when he was not around, Yi Qian chose to be captured in order to cooperate with the Border Drug Enforcement team. This was also the first time Yi Qian was captured after entering the military. Chapter 3881. The muzzle of the gun left a red semicircle mark on Yi Qian's temple. The woman growled in a low voice and even pulled the trigger. If she took one more step, the bullet would pierce through Yi Qian's temple and enter his brain, then shoot out the other side of his temple. The man in the driver's seat slammed on the emergency brake. The ferocious-looking woman was caught off guard and fell forward. The man in the front passenger seat quickly snatched the gun from the woman's hand. "Danny, if you kill her now, your entire family will be killed by the boss." The man who snatched the gun calmly reminded her. They were all subordinates of Qin Mong Sain. They had served in the Burmese army and joined Qin Mong Sain's drug syndicate after they retired. Right now, what their boss needed were living Chinese female soldiers, not dead Chinese female soldiers. If they ruined their boss's plan for personal revenge, everyone would end up in a terrible state. Their families would also be implicated. The car became quiet. The woman named Dan E woke up from her madness. She knew that she couldn't kill the woman sitting next to her today, so she vented her anger by throwing punches at Yi Qian in the car. This time, the two men sitting in front didn't stop the woman from venting her anger. Yi Qian, who had been injected with a strong anesthetic, couldn't feel any pain. When Yi Qian woke up again, he felt like he had been hidden in a barrel similar to a beer barrel. His entire body was knocked around, and his shoulders were in extreme pain. As the dizziness gradually disappeared, Yi Qian felt a dull pain in his chest, arms, and other parts of his body. There was even a burning pain coming from the corner of his mouth. She had been beaten up, and not lightly at that. Her curled-up body wanted to move, but she realized that there was no room for her to move. After being beaten up, she was forced into an oval barrel. Her journey as a captive had just begun, but she could already feel that she would be treated even more cruelly in the future. The captive training she received in the past really wasn't enough. Just as Su Yu said, you never know what kind of predicament you will face after being captured. You never know what you will face. Yi Qian, who had something stuffed in his mouth to prevent him from making a sound, couldn't help but smile bitterly. Every time she faced a new challenge, she couldn't help but think of what Captain Xia said. He said that the training she received now was nothing, and that more difficult things were waiting for her in the future. Captain Xia was right. When faced with a new predicament, she knew that the training she received in the past really was nothing. Captive, she was a captive now. A captive who didn't know what danger she would face in the future. At this moment, Yi Jian's heart was actually a little flustered. She knew that there were tigers in the mountains, so she was clearly mentally prepared for this trip. However, even at this moment, she still felt uneasy. If she was like this, what about E and the other female soldier? Wouldn't they be even? Thinking of Zoe Jean and the other female soldier, Yi Jian gradually calmed down despite her panic. Do your best, Yi Qian. You're a special forces soldier. You're going to save people and execute a decapitation mission. Take things as they come. There's nothing to be nervous about. Yi Qian started to cheer herself on, and in her heart, she recited the oath she took when she joined the army. She had long memorized the oath, and she could even recite it backwards, over and over again. That sonorous and powerful oath, that oath that was filled with blood and bravery, and that oath that was engraved with countless heroic stories, dispersed the little bit of panic in Yi Qian's heart. It made her calmer and more composed. Chapter 3882. She was a soldier who was prepared to sacrifice herself the moment she put on her military uniform. There was nothing to be afraid of. That's right, there was nothing to be afraid of. The boat was still moving on the river. Yi Qian, whose mind was clear, moved her hands and feet again. She didn't look for a way to untie them. She held her breath quietly and used her ears to identify where she was. She heard the sound of water and the sound of machinery running. Other than that, there was no other sound. It was very likely that she was alone. The sound of water, machinery running, and the ups and downs of the boat. Then she should be on the boat. Captain Su had told her that Yi Jean and another female soldier had also left the country through the waterway, and she was in the same situation now. She just didn't know if she was still in the country or had already left. Yi Qian, who didn't struggle, thought quietly. Gradually, her eyelids became heavy again. The space in the bucket was small, and with the strong anesthetic remaining, Yi Qian fell asleep again after about half an hour of rocking. The boat was still moving. Qimong Sane still wanted to make a deal with the anti-drug police, so she was safe for the time being. Since she was safe for the time being, she might as well use the time to rest. The soles of Yi Qian's military boots were installed with satellite signal trackers. Even if the other party left the country without stopping, their whereabouts would be tracked by the anti-drug police and the Yun province's Cloud Leopard Commando team. They would also send a disguised cargo ship to follow them. Sui was on the boat. He stared at the flashing signal. The wireless communication device in his hand had never left his hand since he boarded the boat. The boat is moving too fast. Maintain the speed at 10 knots. Maintain the speed at 10 knots. The speed of the other party's cargo ship was about 12 knots, and the disguised cargo ship was following at 10 knots. The distance between the two was not too far, but not too close. If anything happened, they could immediately support Yi Qian and not be suspected by the other party. The river they were on flowed through China, Laos, Myanmar, and Thailand. Now the boat had entered the Golden Triangle and was about to enter Myanmar. The boat Yi Qian was unaccelerated out of the country. When the boat left the country, the tense expressions of the people on the small cargo ship all relaxed. Now they were safe. On the other hand, the Chinese camouflage ship behind them slowed down and didn't follow them closely. Now that they had entered the Burmese territory, it was their turn to be careful. It had been 36 hours since Yi Qian was kidnapped. Meanwhile, Yi Qian did not know that she had already been kidnapped for 36 hours. She had been drugged with a strong anesthetic and was in a daze the entire way. She would go back to sleep when she woke up and listen to her surroundings when she woke up. When she heard the sound of water, she would go back to sleep. By the time the strong anesthetic wore off, it had been 38 hours since she had been kidnapped. It was 11 p.m. the next day. Less than 10 minutes after 11 o'clock, the cargo ship began to dock. Yi Qian, who had a good night's sleep, woke up with a start when the cargo ship docked. The cargo ship came to a stop. Yi Qian could hear countless footsteps and shouts coming from above. People were moving around to unload the cargo on the ship. They had been unloading the cargo for more than an hour. One by one, Yi Qian, who was quietly huddled in the wooden barrels, heard the creaking sound of metal plates being pulled up. Then, a few people stepped on the metal ladders and came down. Gradually, the heavy footsteps came closer and closer. Finally, They stopped beside the wooden barrels. Chapter 3883. Without any warning, someone pushed down the wooden barrel. She felt dizzy for a while. Bang, 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 bang. Yijian heard someone talking loudly outside. Then, someone else was talking loudly. They were not quarreling, but were excited. The wooden barrel that rolled to the corner finally stopped. Yijian, whose stomach was churning from the spinning, had yet to catch his breath when the barrel was kicked again. The sound of laughter continued. They treated the barrel like a toy. Some kicked it, some rolled it, and some laughed loudly. After not drinking for 38 hours and being kicked around like a toy, Yi Chen, whose body was curled up, swallowed the bitter bile in his mouth several times from the spinning. These people did it on purpose. They used this method to humiliate the Chinese soldiers they had captured. They also used this method to satisfy their sense of achievement. Usually, they were the ones who avoided the Chinese armed police. Now, they could finally hold their heads up high. Since we can't kill her, let's have some fun first. Ha! The Chinese soldiers and the female soldiers from the Arts and Crafts Regiment, didn't they think they were very powerful? What happened in the end? Their female soldiers have fallen into our hands. Ha ha ha! We can do whatever we want. Ha ha ha! The arrogant laughter kept drifting into Yi Qian's ears. The wooden barrel continued to spin. Whenever it stopped, they would immediately kick and push the barrel around for fun. The people who were suppressed by the Chinese, anti-drug police, and border police did not dare to move. They only stopped when they felt that there was no point in kicking the barrel. The sound of a tool being pried came from the lid of the wooden barrel. After a while, fresh air poured in from all directions. Yi Jian lowered her head and constantly adjusted her breathing so that her brain, which was a little lacking in oxygen, could become more awake. Yi Qian did not feel that it was scary to treat him this way. It was just to let them be arrogant for a while. She would have a chance to get back at them one day. Someone grabbed his shoulder and pulled him out of the barrel in an extremely rough manner. Then he was thrown to the side like trash. The cloth covering his eyes was removed. A faint light shone into Yi Qian's eyes. He squinted and saw at least 5 people standing in front of him. This woman is very beautiful. A Burmese man chuckled meaningfully as a wretched smile appeared his eyes. He bent down and grabbed Yi Qian's chin with one hand. He looked left and right and stared at Yi Qian as if he was looking at an object. He turned his head and said to his companions, "Such a beautiful female soldier. Don't you have any other thoughts?" After he finished speaking, everyone around him laughed heartily. "You'd better not have any ideas. The boss is still waiting for us to bring her over. If you break her, the boss will break you. If you want a woman, go outside and find one. Don't lose your life just because you want to feel good now." The lecherous man was persuaded by his companions to let go of Yi Qian's chin. With a look of pity, he said, "She's really beautiful. She's prettier than any woman I've seen before. Beauty doesn't belong to you. Our boss might be able to enjoy it. If one day our boss doesn't like her, I might be able to touch her." The lecherous man clicked his tongue and stood up. Although he liked beautiful women, he cherished his life even more. Yi Qian did not understand what they were saying, but he knew what they were talking about from their laughter. Chapter 3884. Yi Qian couldn't express her anger with her mouth gagged, so she used her eyes to express her anger. Even though she wasn't afraid of the predicament she was in, she still had to express some of the emotions a person should have after being kidnapped. She couldn't just watch from the sidelines and act calm, could she? Her glare only made the Burmese criminals laugh even louder. A man and a woman walked into the cabin along the iron ladder. When the woman saw the men surrounding the Chinese female soldiers, she burst into laughter. Her eyes flashed with a twisted ruthlessness, and she said sarcastically from behind them, "If you want to play so much, why don't you play? She's in your hands. You can do whatever you want to her. What? Are you all so cowardly that you don't dare to play?" The woman said sarcastically. She was trying to provoke the men by looking down on them. She wanted them to take action against the female soldier who hated her to the core. "Dan E, if you don't want to live, don't drag us down with you." A man who came in said unhappily. He knew what the woman beside him wanted to do. Her brother had been caught and executed by the Chinese armed police. She only wanted to take revenge now and didn't care about the lives of others. Yi Qian's gaze fell on the woman standing at the front. When her gaze fell on the woman's flat stomach, she seemed to understand something and her eyes burned with anger. She questioned the woman with her gaze why she pretended to be pregnant to deceive her. The woman faced Yi Qian's angry gaze and walked closer step by step. When she was standing in front of Yi Qian, her face suddenly twisted. She raised her hand and slapped Yi Qian's face hard. Slap, slap, slap. She slapped Yi Qian's cheeks twice. Just wait for your death. Glaring at me? I'll gouge out your eyeballs and feed them to the dogs. Her sinister voice was filled with hatred. The armed police who executed her brother wasn't Yi Qian, but she was now completely angry with Yi Qian. She vented all her anger on Yi Qian and wanted to cut Yi Qian into pieces. Yi Qian, whose mouth was bleeding from the two slaps, began to struggle. She whimpered angrily. The more she struggled, the more excited the woman became. The flames of vengeance in her eyes burned even brighter. You will be in a lot of pain, but I will be very, very happy. Just you wait, female soldier from the Chinese side. In the face of Yi Qian's anger, the woman seemed to be greatly satisfied. She turned around and said to the man behind her, "How can you not enjoy such a beautiful woman? You really make me look down on you." The sharp voice filled the entire cabin. "Dan, you can shut up now. You can take your family and throw away your lives, but my family and I still need to live." The man who appeared with her had a cold expression. He saw that one of the guys, who was famous for liking beautiful women, was really moved by Dan Yi's words. He pulled out the knife from his waist and threw it to the man who was ready to move. "If you don't want to die, you can kill yourself now. Don't drag all of us down with you." The lecherous Burmese man lowered his head and looked at the knife by his feet. He swallowed with difficulty. In the end, he didn't move again. Instead, he took a small step back. He probably felt that it was embarrassing for him to take a step back, so he took another step sideways. His line of sight was no longer blocked. He stared straight at Yi Qian, who was glaring at him. He chuckled and said, "Did you see that? This female soldier is angry. We haven't done anything to her yet, and she's already angry. She's beautiful when she's angry. I like her even more. All right, get off the boat. Don't waste time." Chapter 3885. Dan E., the woman who wanted to trick the man, said in a cold voice, "I don't believe that you don't have any thoughts about such a beautiful woman, especially a female soldier. Who are you trying to fool? Are you trying to fool yourself? What's the use of thinking about her? Is a woman more important than your life?" Of course his life was more important. The Burmese man didn't fall for her trick, but his lust was aroused. He wiped the corner of his mouth and felt that it was a pity that he couldn't get what he wanted. Since he couldn't touch her, he could at least touch her. He took a step forward and was pulled back by his companions. "What else do you want to do? Get to work. You're all a bunch of people that we women look down on. You're only fit to play with women who need money." Danny knew that no one dared to touch the female soldier. She angrily grabbed Yi Qian's hair again and forced Yi Qian to look up at her. "I won't let you off so easily. Just you wait, female soldier." The moment Yi Qian's hair was pulled tightly by the woman, he stopped trying to free himself from the ropes. Yi Qian understood the meaning behind their laughter. He was already prepared to escape. "Yi Qian, if they do anything to you on the road, you don't have to tolerate it. You can fight back." So you had warned Yi Qian in the car. Yi Qian, whose eyes were burning with anger, glared back at the woman. Blood dripped from the corner of his mouth and seeped into the cloth in his mouth. The smell of rust filled his mouth. Danny couldn't help but grit her teeth when she saw Yi Qian's angry glare. In the end, she snorted heavily and released her grip on Yi Qian's hair. She didn't want to die, but she couldn't let others vent her anger for her. In the end, she could only choose to let go for now. Yi Qian's tied hands slowly clenched. His palms were sweaty. Just now, if they really wanted to do something to her, she would definitely choose to fight back. Suyu reminded her. Commander-in-Chief Xia also reminded her. Although they said that, if Yi Qian was really violated, Would he be able to fight back? No one knew. This was an operation full of uncertainties. For a female soldier of Yi Qian to enter the tiger's den alone, there were countless possibilities. Even if she had a signal tracker on her, even if her current location was known by the Yun Province Narcotics Division and the Cloud Leopard Commandos, they were still a certain distance away from Yi Qian. If something really happened, they would be too far away to help. Countless silhouettes slowly climbed out of the ice-cold river and onto the shore. They climbed up one after another and silently flashed into the dense forest like ghosts. Their speed was very fast. Even if caterpillars fell on their bodies, these people did not stop running. They approached the current location of the female soldier at their fastest speed. Quick, quick, quick! The person running at the front shouted in a low voice, signaling his comrades behind him to follow as soon as possible. They had no way to approach the port where the female soldiers were by boat, so they could only approach it by foot. Now that the port was right in front of them, they needed to find the best vantage point to keep an eye on it. The silhouettes passed through the dense forest. The leaves rustled very softly, like the wind blowing through the treetops without leaving a trace. Several silhouettes passed by one after another and approached the port. The port ahead was lit up. The members of the Cloud Leopard Commandos hidden in the trees raised their binoculars to observe the movements ahead. They saw crew members moving boxes of goods onto the shore. A few of them communicated quickly with hand signals. Soon after, two members of the Cloud Leopard Commandos approached the truck parked in front of the port. Chapter 3886. Someone was walking back and forth with a gun. The two of them stomped their feet, and with a whoosh, they jumped onto the truck full of goods and observed from the closest and most dangerous distance. The lone female soldier was still on the boat and had not come down. They had been tracking her for a long time and did not know what the situation was like. The leader of the team in charge of tracking her had a serious expression. It was already 1 o'clock in the morning, and there should be some movement. As time passed, around 1 o'clock in the morning, Yi Qian, with her hands tied, appeared in the line of sight of the Cloud Leopard Commando team. They saw the female soldier, Yi Jian, with her hands tied behind her back. In order to prevent her from escaping, a rope was tied to her feet, which was just enough for her to take one step forward. She also wore a black hood on her head, which was to prevent her from seeing her surroundings and knowing where she was. The members of the Cloud Leopard Commando team tightened their grip on their guns. Where would the female soldier be taken next? Would she be taken to the village where there were already two female soldiers? Don't move. They might leave in the truck. The scout reminded the team members who had already sneaked into the truck to observe. They are already walking towards the truck with the female soldier. 10 meters, 8 meters, 5 meters, 3 meters. Yi Qian was pushed off the boat. She only knew that it was already nighttime when she heard the night insects. She did not know exactly what time it was and did not know how many hours she had been kidnapped. The guy who pushed her off the boat warned her in stiff Mandarin not to try to escape. They were surrounded by their people, and she would not be able to escape. Escape? She had only thought of escaping when she was in the cabin. Now, she did not have any thoughts of escaping. 2 meters. Prepare to get on the truck. When Yi Qian was pushed onto the truck, the scouts of the Cloud Leopard Commando team sneaked down from the tree. The truck started and the Cloud Leopard Commando team members continued to move forward. Inform Team 1 that the truck is already heading southeast. We will follow them now and ask them to keep a close eye on it. The third female soldier will be arriving at the destination soon. Team 1 was the team members who had been following Zhou Yijin and the other female soldier. At this time, they had already sneaked into a village near a Burmese military unit in Myanmar. Zhou Yijin and the other female soldier were in the village and were temporarily safe. Qin Mong Sane did not appear, so it was impossible to confirm whether he was in the village or not. The village was located deep within the borders of the three countries. It was close to a certain unit of the Burmese military, which was the backer of Qin Mong Sane. With his protection, Qin Mong Sane became the most difficult drug lord to catch. Qin Mong Sane was not in the village. He had gone to the army's headquarters to meet with his protector. He didn't tell them his plan. He only said that there was an international drug dealer, Cobra, who wanted to meet with Umbrella. He wanted to see if they had time to meet. Cobra he wanted to meet with the senior military official of Myanmar. When he first mentioned it, he thought that he would be rejected by Kim Mong-sung. But when he tentatively mentioned it, the senior military official was very generous and said that he could introduce him to the senior military official. This made Cobra very happy. He immediately prepared a bank card with enough US dollars as a meeting gift and presented it to the senior military official of Myanmar. At this time, Cobra and Chi Mong-sain's protector were chatting happily. They even talked about future cooperation. One was happy to find out the considerable balance in the card, and the other was happy to find the Burmese military for protection. Therefore, both sides looked very satisfied. Chapter 3887. The Burmese military officials even agreed to send someone to escort Cobra into the Chinese territory, instead of sneaking in. Cobra expressed his gratitude to them. He had always been cunning and suspicious, but he didn't lower his guard because of this. According to his investigation, Chi Mong-sain was a guy who would do anything for his own benefit, similar to himself. A person like him couldn't be so generous all of a sudden. There must be a reason. Before Cobra could figure out what the reason was, his bodyguard received a call from Luke, who had sneaked into the Chinese territory. Luke said that he and Xia, who had entered the Chinese territory, were stopped without any warning. If Xia hadn't reacted fast enough, they would have been detained by the Chinese armed police and wouldn't have been able to come back. More importantly, the goods they were responsible for bringing over weren't poisonous goods at all. They looked like poisonous goods, but they were actually the most common sugar. At that moment, Cobra knew why Chi Mong-sain was so generous. It turned out that he had asked his subordinates to sneak into the Chinese territory to transport the goods. He wanted to use his two subordinates to distract the Chinese armed police so that he could kidnap the Chinese female soldiers in exchange for the goods that had been detained by the Chinese armed police. This was a cunning and vicious wolf. His generosity was fake, but his calculation was real. Introducing him to the Burmese military officials seemed generous on the surface. But what if he wanted to kill him? The bodyguard whispered a few words in Cobra's ear. Cobra, who had a rough idea of what was going on, was able to control his anger. He continued to talk with the Burmese military officials until the end. Chi Mong-sain's bodyguard really wanted to cooperate with Cobra. After the conversation, he whispered to Chi Mong-sain, "We can cooperate. His strength is far above yours. With him, I can make more money." "I think so too. With him, our business will expand, and we will make more money," Chi Mong-sain said with a smile, but his eyes were gloomy. Cobra was really something. No wonder Commander Min Lai asked him to go out to do something. It turned out that he wanted to avoid him. Had they reached a deal that he didn't know about? The coldness in Chi Mong-sain's eyes deepened as he smiled. It seemed that he had miscalculated. He had thought that no matter how powerful Cobra was, it would be impossible for Commander Min Lai to have the intention to cooperate immediately. In the end, he had underestimated Cobra. Who the hell was Cobra? He had been investigating for a few days, but there was no news at all. He only knew that he was indeed an international drug king. Other than that, there was no other information. Should he leak some information to the anti-drug police that an international drug king was trying to sneak into China's territory? Cobra had been targeted by the Chinese before the cooperation even began. With Commander Min Lai's caution, he would definitely reconsider cooperating with Cobra. Even if he chose to cooperate with Cobra in the end, he would eventually cooperate through himself. Chi Mong-sain, who didn't want Cobra to take away his protection, began to think. Outside, Cobra, who was waiting for Chi Mong-sain to come out, was holding a phone with a blocked signal. His eyes were gloomy. He hadn't tasted the feeling of being schemed against for a long time. Well, the feeling of being schemed against was like drinking a cup of coffee that he hated the most. It filled his heart with a violent desire to kill. How dare Chi Mong-sain scheme against him? He would let him know the consequences of scheming against him. How are Luke and Xia now? Where are they? Cobra asked in a low voice. Are they being watched by the Chinese? Chapter 3888. The bodyguard who received Luke's call was expressionless and answered seriously. "We're temporarily out of the way. We're not sure if we've been targeted. Luke has been in contact with us this afternoon. Fortunately, I left the army just now. Otherwise, sir, we wouldn't be able to receive all the information from the outside. If Qin Mong Sane wants to attack us, sir, it would be very difficult for us to escape." Cobra had already thought of this when he was talking to the Burmese military officials. Therefore, he chose to talk about topics that interested this person and maximize the benefits. He wanted to let the other party know that cooperating with him would make more money, and that the money would be used to provide his army with more advanced weapons. He knew about the current political situation in Myanmar and knew what topics were more interesting to the country's senior officials. "We don't have to worry about our safety for the time being. I'm thinking about how Luke and Xia are doing now. If they've been targeted," he pressed the corners of his mouth tightly, as if he was making a very difficult decision. The bodyguard standing next to him stood quietly, waiting for him to speak again. "If they've really been targeted, you don't need to deal with them. You can deal with them for me." He meant that he would give up on Luke and Xia Jinyuan. In this regard, the bodyguard didn't have any superfluous expression. He just nodded with a cold face, indicating that he understood. Cobra didn't want to confront the Chinese military. They had so much control over the border that even the Burmese military officials looked serious when talking about it. It was obvious that the country's army was very difficult to deal with. He just wanted to go to China to find his old friends. He didn't want to have any contact with the country's military. No matter how capable Luke and Xia Jinyuan were, he didn't want to have a conflict with the Chinese military because of them. When it was time to give up, he had to give up. Similarly, when it was time to retaliate, he would definitely find the right time to retaliate. He remembered Qin Mong Sane's plan. The two guys who were good at scheming had already started scheming against each other before they even succeeded in cooperating. They both hid it in their hearts and smiled when they met. They didn't show their thoughts at all. When Cobra left the army, it was already 3 o'clock in the morning. He and Qin Mong Sane entered the army at night. When they left, they avoided many Burmese soldiers and rushed back to the village where they were staying. At around 4 in the morning, Yi Qian was pushed out of the car again. After walking for about 10 minutes, he was pushed into a room with a small ventilation window, which was the dungeon of Qin Mong Sane. The moment she pushed the door open, Yi Qian heard the sound of movement in the room. Yi Qian, who had been pushed down by someone, whimpered as she struggled. She used her voice to test if there was anyone else in the room. Yi Qian heard the same whimpering sound. It was so familiar that a look of joy appeared on his face. "Yi Jin," she heard Yi Jin's voice. 42 hours after Yi Qian was kidnapped, she finally met up with Zhou Jin. The Cloud Leopard commandos who were keeping watch outside sent the latest news back to China. When Si received the news, he slumped in his chair. After 42 hours of mental tension, his brain finally got some rest. Yi Qian finally met up with Zhou Jin, who had been kidnapped for 4 days. Zhou Jin thought that her Aunt Lu would come to save her, but she didn't think that it would be in such a way. Zhou Jin, who was resting her head on Yi Qian's shoulder, couldn't control her tears. They instantly flowed out. Using such a method to save her, how could her Aunt Lu be so stupid? Chapter 3889. Zhou Jin was actually the same as family Xia. She was not easily moved. Although she was usually carefree, she was quite calm during critical moments. She was definitely not easily moved. However, this time, Yi Qian directly went to her side. No matter how calm Zhou Jin was, her tears still flowed like a broken dam. She knew that her Aunt Lu would definitely save her. She also knew that her Aunt Lu would definitely know that she was in danger after sending the SOS message. She would immediately contact her third uncle, who was the best person to solve the problem. But really, she never thought that Aunt Lu would use this method to save her. If it was today that Aunt Lu was in danger, Zhou Jin would definitely not risk her life to save Aunt Lu. At this moment, Zhou Jin finally understood why her sixth brother, who was so hard to fall in love with and who the whole family thought would be single for the rest of his life, loved Aunt Lu so deeply. Aunt Lou like this deserved the most beautiful and best love in the world. Hearing Yi Qian's soft, comforting Zhou Yijian's body that had been tense for the past few days instantly relaxed. The more relaxed she was, the harder her tears flowed. Sobs came from her mouth, which was also stuffed with cloth strips. The other female soldier couldn't help but cry softly. When the female soldier cried, Yi Qian, who was rubbing her head against Zhou Yijian's head to comfort her, couldn't help but be startled. He only cared about comforting Zhou Yijian and didn't go to comfort her comrades. She turned her body and awkwardly wrote a few words in Zhou Yijian's hand with her finger. Zhou Yijian, who cried until her hair was wet, sniffled hard and moved closer to a crying comrade. For the past few days, the two of them had been using their hands to write words in each other's palms, encouraging each other. On her side, the female soldier also moved. Soon, the two of them were back to back. Zhou Yijian wrote a few words in her hand. Then, the female soldier cried even louder. The person who was pushed in just now was not directly kidnapped like her and Yijian. She was here to rescue them. That's great, that's great. They didn't have to be so scared anymore. The female soldier cried tears of joy. Zhou Yijian was crying and laughing at the same time. Because her mouth was stuffed with cloth to prevent them from making any noise, her expression when she wanted to laugh was very funny. Fortunately, the three of them were wearing masks, so they couldn't see each other. It didn't matter if they were ugly or not. Besides, who cared if she was ugly or not at this moment? Everyone was happy. Yi Qian was also very happy that Jean and her comrades were safe and sound and had not been tortured. After being kidnapped, Qin Mongsane's subordinates were afraid that they would be discovered by the Chinese armed police, so they hurried on their way. They did not have any evil intentions. It seemed that, as Captain Su said, they did plan to use them to complete a deal with the anti-drug police. As for her, she was waiting for Qin Mongsane to show up and complete the mission she needed to complete. The leader of the Yun province military region also let out a long sigh of relief when he received Su Yu's call. Fortunately, everything went smoothly. Fortunately, there were no hiccups along the way. Commander-in-Chief Xia, who had been waiting for news of the three juniors, received a call from the Yun province military region. He, who had only slept 3 to 4 hours a night for the past few days, hung up the phone and washed his face with cold water. The initial difficulties were finally over. Next, they entered the next step of the plan. There was news from Old Six that they had successfully sneaked back to Myanmar. There was news from Old Six's wife that she had finally met Yijian and the other female soldier who had been kidnapped. The four of them were safe. Chapter 3890. Commander-in-Chief Xia picked up a towel to wipe off the water droplets on his face. When he hung up the towel, he let out a long sigh. He didn't tell Xiaoya that Old Six was also in Myanmar. He swallowed the words back several times. He found that he didn't dare to say it at all, for fear that it would distract Xiaoya. Now, the two of them were both in Myanmar. The fate of these two children. It had to be said that even God couldn't separate them. Cobra and Qin Mongsane met, and Xiaoya was in Qin Mongsane's territory. At any time, she could meet the most wanted drug lord of China's anti-narcotics police. He didn't know if the two children would meet. If they met, as a father, he would be happy for the fate of the two of them. Yi Qian and Xia Jinyuan didn't know that they were so close to each other. One was already in Myanmar, and the other was still desperately escaping from China's territory, rushing into the dense forest with Luke. Behind them were the Chinese Narcotics Division armed police and the roaring dogs of the Narcotics Division. Since they had been targeted by the Chinese anti-narcotics police, how could they let the two of them escape so easily? What's more, the anti-narcotics police chasing Xia Jinyuan didn't know that one of the two people they were chasing was a Chinese soldier. They only knew that two drug dealers jumped out of the car and escaped. They were much more agile than the criminals they had chased in the past. The complex terrain of the dense forest couldn't trap them at all. Even the anti-narcotics dogs in their hands couldn't catch up immediately. Here, quick! Flank them! Flank them! They're still 11 kilometers away from the border of Myanmar. Don't let them escape. Assault team, speed up. Quick, quick, quick. Behind them, the anti-narcotics police, who had no idea that they were Chinese soldiers, were led by the anti-narcotics dogs, which had a keen sense of smell, to chase after the two escaping people. The olive-green figures seemed to blend into the dense forest environment. The armed police, wearing helmets and holding steel guns, didn't care about the skills of the people they were chasing or whether they had any lethal weapons on them. They only knew that the two people who were running away were criminals who threatened the stability of our country's society. They could only capture them alive or kill them. In order to prevent Luke from suspecting his identity, Xia Jinyuan only informed a small portion of the executive departments in Yun province to cooperate. For example, in the narcotics police force, only he and Luke had to go through the border checkpoint to cooperate. Nothing else was notified. That was why they were being chased without any pretense at all. Both of them were in an extremely sorry state as they rushed and ran in the dense forest. They simply did not know where the right direction was and only ran in the direction that was convenient for them. Xia, if this continues, neither of us will be able to escape. We need to split up. We have to split up. The Chinese armed police are too difficult to deal with, and they have dogs with them. With the dogs, no matter where we escape to, they will find us. Luke brushed away the leaves that were blocking his way and went into the dense forest. After his face was pricked several times by the caterpillars hidden in the leaves, he touched his burning face and said gloomily, "I now suspect that all of this is Qin Mong's sane scheme. But why would he scheme against us?" Xia, I can't understand. Xia Jinyuan, who didn't know that the Chinese soldiers had been kidnapped, also couldn't understand why such a scheme was arranged. However, since it was a scheme, there had to be some calculations involved. It was just that he and Luke didn't know about it. Chapter 3891. But now was not the time to think about what Qin Mong Sane was plotting, but how to escape. The two of them could not split up, based on the situation. With Cobra's suspicious personality, if he and Luke were to split up and both of them had to return alive, Cobra would definitely suspect that since the journey was so dangerous, how could they return alive despite being in so much danger? He would not voice his suspicions, but he would start to distrust them. The foundation he had worked so hard to build over the past year would collapse and return to zero. Therefore, it was not advisable to split up and escape. Luke was Cobra's trusted bodyguard, so it would be better for the two of them to stay together. Xia Jinyuan said, "If we split up, we will still be chased. If we run together, we can help each other. Don't talk so much nonsense. Hurry up and run. Run up the mountain. As long as we are out of China's territory, they won't dare to cross the border to catch us. I hate being chased by dogs. It's so ket up." Luke did not insist that the two of them split up and escape. He only mentioned it casually. If they really split up and escaped, who could escape and who would be caught? They would either be caught together or escape together. If this is really Qin Mong Sane's scheme, I swear I'll find a chance to blow his head off when I go back. Hearing the dog barking coming from afar, Luke plunged into the dense forest. He was very agile. Xia Jinyuan did not stop either. But when he rushed into the dense forest, he used the weapon in his hand, a small folding knife, to leave 2 new marks on the tree. It meant that only the two of them were escaping and no one was coming to help. The anti-narcotics police, who saw the 2 new marks again, did not understand what it meant. They reported to their superiors again and continued to chase. They did not understand what it meant to see 2 new marks from time to time, but Major General Yang, who had been paying attention to this matter, understood. He sighed softly and said to Su Yu of the Yun Province Anti-Narcotics Police, "Tell your soldiers that so far, no one has come to help them. Only 2 people have escaped. You guys chase after them. If there are 3 traces, it means that there are reinforcements." Su Yu is the leader of the narcotics division. On Yiqian's side, he sent out a certain number of troops to cooperate with the Cloud Leopard Commandos to secretly protect Yiqian, who was deep in the tiger's den. On Xia Jinyuan's side, he also needed to cooperate with the military, but he couldn't ask too much. Other than Major General Yang and Commander-in-Chief Xia, only his comrades who were on a mission with him abroad last time knew that Xia Jinyuan had sneaked into Cobra's side. Other than that, no one else knew. After receiving an explanation, Suyu vaguely felt that there were spies on their side. To be honest, there were more than one or two spies like this. Both the narcotics police force and the narcotics police force had spies outside. Otherwise, how would they know that Qin Mongsane was planning to kidnap female soldiers and make a deal with the Chinese side? Informants were spies. They had them, and so did the military. The only thing he didn't quite understand was that the armed police under him were chasing after two escaped drug dealers. Why would the military also send undercover agents to the drug dealers? The military sent undercover agents to the drug dealers. Things shouldn't be that simple. Suyu didn't know about Cobra, so naturally, he didn't understand. The military couldn't reveal everything to Suyu. He only needed to know that one of the two drug dealers currently being chased by the narcotics police force was a Chinese soldier. Chapter 3892. When the fish belly was pulled open in the horizon, the morning light was faintly visible. The dense forest was still dark. Xia Jinyuan and Luke, who had crossed the boundary marker of the border between the two countries 10 minutes ago, directly collapsed on the soft, withered leaves. The two of them panted heavily until their chests heaved up and down rapidly. Neither of them wanted to speak. They took deep breaths to calm themselves down. Xia Jinyuan, who was sniffing the smell of rotting trees, turned his head slightly and looked towards the direction of the central region. The scenery there was beautiful and majestic. The mountains were undulating like angry dragons. Xia Jinyuan looked in front of him, and a slight smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He really didn't expect that one day he would have to flee from the motherland he was guarding in such a sorry state. He had to admit that the Chinese border police were quite strong. They chased him all the way and didn't stop at all. Their good comrades were a drug sniffer dog and a search dog. No wonder they were the thorn in the side of those transnational drug dealers. They were really amazing. If he and Luke had been a little slower, they would have caught up with them. Even now, he could still hear their roars. One roar after another. It was truly frightening. Xia Jinyuan, who was being chased in such a sorry state, smiled even wider. Although he was almost caught by the Chinese border police several times, he was very happy in his heart. He was happy for the increasingly strong border defense of his motherland. Xia Jinyuan, who was close to his motherland but couldn't go back openly, withdrew his reluctant gaze, closed his eyes gently, and took a deep breath again. A beautiful picture of the country seemed to be spread out in his mind, and he could still feel a sense of security in his motherland. The Chinese border police stood in front of the border marker between the two countries, looking at the trampled marks on both sides and holding the steel guns in their hands tightly. They actually let the other party escape. The drug sniffer dog and the search dog didn't give up. They roared towards the Burmese border, and the soldiers in charge of taking care of them pulled the ropes tightly. Little by little, their loyal comrades refused to come back. "Line up!" Their squad leader gritted his teeth so hard that it seemed like he was going to break them. He ordered his comrades to gather and return the way they came. The soldiers took another deep look at the Burmese territory and left with regret that they didn't manage to catch the two transnational drug dealers. They could not cross into the borders of other countries, nor could they illegally enter the borders of other countries with weapons. No matter how fierce the search dogs were, they could only leave. The barking from the dogs on the mountain gradually disappeared. Luke, who was worried that the Chinese border police would enter the country with guns, was completely relieved. Xia Jinyuan could clearly hear his sigh of relief. After resting for at least 20 minutes, Luke, who looked as if he had just survived a disaster, opened his mouth. "Zhongfeng, I don't think I'll come here a second time while I'm still alive." Their armed police were like a pack of wolves. They would not give up easily once they found their prey. "God, thank you for letting me escape from the wolf claws of the Chinese armed police." Although he had caught his breath, his voice was extremely hoarse. After running for so long, his throat was so dry that it was congested with blood, revealing a deep sense of fatigue. Xia Jinyuan didn't say anything. He just waved his hand, indicating that he didn't want to talk yet, and just wanted to have a good rest. In response, Luke laughed. He raised his arm, patted Xia Jinyuan's shoulder heavily, and said gratefully, "Xia, if it weren't for you, I would have been killed by the Chinese armed police. Thank you, Xia, for saving my life again." Chapter 3893. I just want to lie down for a while, so shut your mouth. Xia Jinyuan removed the hand on his shoulder. Luke could see the lingering fear in his indifferent expression. Luke laughed in a low voice. He stood up with one hand on the dried leaves and reached out to Xia Jinyuan, who was still lying down and didn't want to get up. "Buddy, we should go back now. Although we are already in Myanmar, I think we still need to find a way to get back to Cobra's side." Looking at Luke's outstretched hand, Xia Jinyuan reached out his own hand. Luke held his outstretched hand tightly. Xia Jinyuan stood up with the help of Luke's arm. He patted off the dead leaves and foam on his back and said calmly, "Keep walking forward and contact Cobra. I think someone will come to pick us up." "Good. That's a good idea. Let's go, my brother. I must treat you to a drink when we get back to celebrate that we are still alive today." "I don't drink, thank you." "Oh, I forgot. How about I invite you to a bar to find a beautiful woman?" "Thank you, but I'm not interested in women." "God, my brother Xia, do you like men?" "Oh no, I think women are the best. Big breasts, big buttocks. How cool it is to touch them." "Sorry, I'm even less interested in men." "Don't tell me you're really as impotent as those black eyes said." A fist was aimed directly at the back of Luke's head. Luke dodged, turned his head, and laughed. "You can prove to me that I'm not impotent. If you're not interested in women or men, what are you interested in?" "Money. I'm most interested in money." Xia Jinyuan withdrew his fist and exhaled. "If you mention something I'm not interested in again, my fist will teach you the consequences of making me unhappy." "Ha, I like money too." Without the pursuit of the Chinese armed police, Luke, who was in a good mood, laughed even louder. Thank God, he met a good guy. If only he was really a good guy. The laughter continued, but Luke, whose eyes were gradually clouding over, let out a long sigh in his heart. How great would it be if he really was a very, very good fellow? The sky was bright, and the morning sun broke through the darkness and sprinkled all over the earth. Some places were bright, while others were still dark. Just like this world, there was light and darkness. Xia Jinyuan looked at Luke, who was laughing nonstop. He used the knife in his hand to carve 2 more marks on the tree. These 2 marks were different from the ones he had left for the narcotics police. It was an X. About an hour later, a man wearing jungle camouflage, but his nationality was unknown, squatted by the tree with the marks. He touched the marks gently with his gloved hand, then raised his hand and waved behind him. Several men wearing the same jungle camouflage as him, with dark green paint on their faces and unknown nationalities, came out of the dense forest. Q King left them. They're very fresh. Even the sap hasn't dried yet. I didn't chase the wrong tree. G3 Een Rong said in a low voice, his eyes shining with excitement. Good guy, we can finally meet. Z7 Han Jing also reached out to touch them and laughed. When the time comes, he will be our enemy, and we will be the messengers of justice. I used to dream of having a fight with him. This time my wish will come true. Ha ha ha. Chapter 3894. Han Jing did not dare to laugh too loudly. He suppressed the laughter in his chest, and his wolf-like eyes shone like the morning sun. It's great to be able to see my brother again. They had not seen each other for more than a year, and there had been no news at all. His comrades in the brigade had been silently worried. Now, they could finally King relax. T6, who was holding his gun horizontally, kicked Z7's butt, whose shoulders were shaking from laughing. He laughed and said, You want to compete with Q King? Don't King need us to save you when the time comes. How is that possible? Han Jing, who was almost kicked to the ground, stood up, raised his chin, and replied confidently, Let's wait and see. We'll see who needs saving. Several of his comrades snorted in response. Even K7, who was in charge of security, snorted. Cut the crap. Go, let's go. Follow closely, don't lose them. V8's team should have already arrived at the village where Cobra is hiding. We can't fall too far behind. G3 waved his hand, and the 7th Snowfield Brigade Special Forces who had secretly sneaked into Myanmar with Xia Jinyuan quickly followed. The traces that Xia Jinyuan had left behind for them were scratched and erased, and they were disguised as if they had been gnawed on by wild animals. Major General Yang had always been in control of the Snowfield Brigade's direction of operations. The 14 Special Forces were divided into 2 groups, and they entered Myanmar one after the other. One group secretly followed Xia Jinyuan all the way, while the other group was led by V8 to the village in Myanmar, where Xia Jinyuan had entered the Chinese territory and reported. Now that the group led by G3 had found the traces left behind by Xia Jinyuan, Major General Yang immediately learned of it and promptly reported it to Commander-in-Chief Xia. Commander-in-Chief Xia not only knew the movements of the Snowfield Brigade Special Forces, but also knew the movements of the Cloud Leopard Commandos belonging to the Yun Province military region. The Cloud Leopard Commandos were responsible for rescuing the female soldiers and supporting Yi Qian's retreat, while the Snowfield Brigade Special Forces were mainly cooperating with Xia Jinyuan. Commander-in-Chief Xia, who had not been home for a few days, and Major General Yang were sitting in the conference room, discussing how to avoid Cobra if Cobra and Qin Mongsane were together in Yi Qian's successful decapitation. Cobra could not be touched now, and the only person who could touch him was Xia Jinyuan. Then, there was a problem now. Chief Commander Xia said to Major General Yang, "Contact the members of the Cloud Leopard Commando team and tell them to evacuate immediately after rescuing the 2 female soldiers, so as to avoid conflict with the Snowfield Brigade Special Forces. Inform Qing Yao separately that it is very likely that she will meet with Q King. If she meets with Q King, inform Q King to stop Cobra from entering China's territory. Immediately inform the Snowfield Brigade of the Cloud Leopard Commandos' actions. They can take advantage of the Cloud Leopard Commandos' actions to launch an attack on Cobra, and at the same time secretly protect the Cloud Leopard Commandos as they retreat. If Q King does not meet with Qing Yao and Cobra is not with Qin Mongsane, then the Cloud Leopard Commandos will still be acting alone." Major General Yang then added, "There is another possibility. Cobra and Qin Mongsane are together, but Q King has not returned to Cobra's side in time. At this time, the Cloud Leopard Commandos will not have the opportunity to cooperate with the Snowfield Brigade." "That's right, there is such a possibility." Commander-in-Chief Xian nodded. "Therefore, the Cloud Leopard Commandos' actions and Qing Yao's decapitation mission will continue as usual, and the Snowfield Brigade's Special Forces will continue to follow the plan arranged by Q King. There will be no conflict between the 2 forces. What we are now considering is that the 2 forces will cross each other. Qing Yao and Q King will meet, and the entire plan will need to be adjusted and implemented in advance of Q King's plan. And to implement Q King's plan in advance, it needs to be built on the basis that Qing Yao can inform Q King about the existence of the Cloud Leopard Commandos. Only then can the plan be implemented." Chapter 3895. Commander-in-Chief Xia looked at the overall situation, and after considering all aspects, he directly carried out Xia Jinyuan's plan in advance. More importantly, as a father, he really didn't want to see his only son take such a huge risk and even put his life on the line in order to gain Cobra's ultimate trust. Helping Cobra escape from the battle provoked by Qin Mongsane, he felt that he could also gain Cobra's trust. This was the painstaking effort of a father, and Major General Yang already understood. However, his thoughts still needed Xia Jinyuan's approval in the end. If Xia Jinyuan didn't think it was desirable, then Commander-in-Chief Xia's arrangement would be in vain. After the discussion with Major General Yang, Commander-in-Chief Xia and Yun Province's person in charge, Su Yu, were in a video conference. However, Cobra and Xia Jinyuan only mentioned that there was another Special Forces team on a mission that would secretly assist the Cloud Leopard Commando team in their retreat. For the Yun Province's military, this was very good news. They were now worried that Qin Mongsane would concentrate their firepower and attack. They were even more worried that Myanmar would find out that the Cloud Leopard Commando team had secretly sneaked into Myanmar, causing unnecessary trouble in the future. Now that there was another Special Forces team to assist, the Cloud Leopard Commando team could speed up their retreat with the rescued female soldiers. As for what the other Special Forces team was doing and why they appeared in the same village, the Yun province's military and Suyu didn't ask. Since the commander-in-chief and major general didn't directly say the reason, they didn't have to ask. Everything was going on nervously and orderly. The Cloud Leopard Commando team and the Snowfield Brigade's Special Forces received the latest orders from their superiors almost at the same time. When the Cloud Leopard Commando team learned that there was another Special Forces team nearby, every team member more or less had some doubts in their hearts. Since their superiors didn't say anything, they naturally couldn't ask too much. They only knew that after they rescued the female soldiers, they would immediately retreat. The Snowfield Brigade's Special Forces knew about the existence of the Cloud Leopard Commando team from the beginning, so they weren't surprised. What really surprised them was, Qing Miao. Qing Miao is also here? No way. Are you sure you didn't hear wrong? How could Qing Miao be here too? Didn't Q King say that he wanted to hide it from Qing Miao? At this moment, he still wanted Qing Miao to meet Q King so that she could tell Q King to bring forward his plan. How much of a coincidence could it be? The T6 combatant hiding behind the leaves said with a face full of disbelief. He even wondered if G3 had heard wrongly. Didn't they say that Qing Miao was studying in a basic company in the Nangguang military region? The Nangguang military district was very far away from the Yun province military district. One was on the southwest border of the motherland, while the other was in the south of the motherland. There were countless provinces in between, and the Qing dynasty, which should be in Nangguang, had appeared in the Yun province. T6 really suspected that G3 had misheard. G3 didn't believe it either, but it was the truth. Qing Miao was here, and she was one of the 3 kidnapped female soldiers. Therefore, when G3 said that Yi Qian was also one of the 3 kidnapped female soldiers, not only did T6 think that he had misheard, even his other comrades also thought so. Qing Miao was kidnapped? Do you think that's possible? Han Jing asked G3's Inrong. G3 was silent for a while before sighing. She deliberately got kidnapped in order to save the 2 female soldiers who were the first to be kidnapped. To make a long story short, G3 told them about the joint plan of the border police and the Yun province military district. As soon as he finished, T6 let out a low F***K with a vicious look in his eyes. Chapter 3896. The T6 combatant, who had a murderous look in his eyes, hugged his rifle tightly and said in a low voice, "Is Qing Miao's life so worthless in their eyes?" Not only did they kidnap the 2 female soldiers, but they even included Qing Miao as well. After I heard the entire plan, I only had one thought. What a coincidence. It's really not an ordinary coincidence. How coincidental is it? It's so coincidental that Qing Miao is now with the 2 female soldiers who were kidnapped first. The T6 combatant could not understand why Qing Miao had actually agreed to such a risky plan. How could the Yun province military district and the border police division not know what would happen to the female soldiers if they were captured? How could they dare to let Qing Miao take such a risk? How could they dare to make such an arrangement? The T6 combatant's lips were pursed into a straight line. It's not a coincidence. It should be said that the Qin Mong Sane was overconfident and thought that it was impossible for the Chinese side to find the kidnapped female soldiers. Moreover, gathering the 3 kidnapped female soldiers together made it easier for them to carry out their mission. Also, you have to believe in the ability of the Border Police Division. Since they were able to arrange for the Qin Mong Sane subordinates to kidnap Qing Miao, they were confident that Qing Miao would be with the 2 kidnapped female soldiers. Also, the G3 combatant pursed his slightly cracked lips and said with a serious expression, "One of the kidnapped female soldiers is Q King's cousin. Our higher-ups have agreed to let Qing Miao join. I don't have to say it, but you guys should know what I mean, right?" The T6 combatant suddenly looked up at the G3 combatant with a hint of shock in his eyes. One of the kidnapped female soldiers turned out to be Q King's cousin. If it weren't for that, the big boss wouldn't have agreed to let Qin Yao join them. For the sake of Q King, it's even better to have Qin Yao join them. Qin Yao's ability to fight alone will definitely allow Q King to carry out his mission with peace of mind. He won't have to be distracted by his cousin's kidnapping. The Snowfield Brigade fell silent. If that was the case, they could understand why Qin Yao was put in danger. The comrades of the Snowfield Brigade felt their hearts sink. G3 looked at his comrades who were pressing their lips together and said in a low voice, "The most important thing now is to contact Q King. He has to know Big Boss's arrangements before he can execute his plan in advance." That's right. Whether or not the plan could be brought forward, they had to first contact Q King. Relying on them to contact Q King didn't work. Relying on the comrades led by V8 to contact Q King also didn't work. There were still people around Q King that they couldn't contact. She could only rely on Qin Yao. But how would Qin Yao know about Big Boss's arrangement? Taking a step back, even if Qin Yao knew, could she really meet Q King? Whether or not she could meet Q King depended on whether Cobra and Qin Mong Sane would always be together. Once Cobra left Myanmar, the possibility of Qin Yao and Q King meeting would be zero. If Qin Yao and Q King couldn't meet, then the missions of the two teams would still be parallel and wouldn't overlap. If they met, the two teams would still cooperate for a short period of time. Therefore, it didn't matter if the two of them couldn't meet. Other than the increased danger factor of Q King in the future, nothing else would be affected. G3 looked at the sky that was starting to brighten, and then looked at the traces that had been erased by his comrades. Although his deep voice was slow, it was flamboyant. The mission of Cloud Leopard and Qin Yao doesn't conflict with ours. Now we just need to follow Q King. Let's go. Don't fall too far behind. Regardless of whether Qin Yao and Q King would meet or not, the most important thing was whether they could successfully complete the heavy responsibility on their shoulders. As for other things, they couldn't think about it for now. Chapter 3897. 7 camouflaged figures passed through the dense forest, also fighting for the heavy responsibility on their shoulders. At this time, it was the Spring Festival in China. The special forces of the Shuiyu team were following closely behind their captain. They carried steel guns and risked their lives. The light of the homes was behind them, and their existence was only to protect the light of the homes. Xia Jinyuan, who was moving forward, knew that his comrades must be following closely behind him. Therefore, whenever Luke wanted to stop and rest before continuing, he would urge him. In the end, Luke even thought that there might be Chinese armed police chasing after them. However, when they came out of the dense forest, the mobile phone finally had a signal, but Luke did not see the appearance of the Chinese armed police. Xia Jinyuan did not give him time to catch his breath, and asked him to hurry up and contact Cobra. "I really admire you, Xia. We started running yesterday afternoon, and now." Luke looked at the time on his phone. It was already 12 noon the next day. "It's 12 noon now. We've been running for a long time. Really, Xia, listen to me. We really need to have a good rest before we talk again." Resting for a while would delay the time of his comrades behind him. Xia Jinyuan coldly looked at Luke, who had lowered his vigilance after entering Myanmar, and said without any room for negotiation, "Aren't you worried that Qin Mong Sane is plotting against Mr. Cobra?" Her words reminded Luke, and it also made Luke's eyes darken. He lowered his eyes and shrugged helplessly. "All right, you reminded me. That's right. We do need to return to Mr. Cobra's side as soon as possible. If something happens to Mr. Cobra, I think all of us will not be able to leave Myanmar." After coming out of the dense forest, Luke called Cobra, who represented darkness. While he was talking to Cobra, Xia Jinyuan made a mark in a hidden place. This time, the mark was a little complicated. It was composed of pictures, and other than his comrades in the Snowfield Brigade who could understand it, no one else could guess what it meant. This was to tell his comrades behind him that they were about to leave by means of transport, and their destination was the same. A few hours ago, Cobra returned to a nearby village from the Myanmar army. When he came back, the sky was just turning bright. Knowing that he was plotted against by Qin Mong Sane, Cobra did not rest. Instead, he carried the drawing board that he always carried everywhere and placed it in front of the village and began to paint. Cobra was good at ink painting, and each ink painting was quite beautiful. However, people who knew him well knew that he only painted when he was in a bad mood. Now, his bodyguards knew that their boss was in a very bad mood, so it was best not to go and cause trouble. Even his trusted bodyguards did not dare disturb him. Cobra and Xiao, and they were now safely in Myanmar's territory, and there were no armed police officers following them. Cobra, who was concentrating on painting, heard the bodyguard talking in a low voice. He knew that his two capable subordinates had exhausted all their strength to escape from China's territory. With a slightly gloomy expression, he signaled the bodyguard who was talking to Luke to pass him the phone. When Luke heard Cobra's voice, he first greeted him and then asked if Cobra had time to listen to what he wanted to say next. Cobra, who was holding a brush in one hand, used watercolor to outline the mountains and rivers. He shrugged his shoulders and smiled. Of course. What do you want to tell me? Chapter 3898. Cobra's mood improved a lot when he learned that his two subordinates had safely entered Myanmar. When he heard that Luke was concerned about his safety, Cobra felt much better. Having a loyal subordinate was a good thing for him. Sir, Qin Mong Sane deliberately asked us to go to China for him. Does he have other arrangements? Luke said in a deep voice. All the goods in the car were crystal sugar, and there were only a very small amount of poisonous goods. I can't believe that he asked us to drive a truck into China for less than 50 grams of poisonous goods. So, I'm worried that he has other plans that we don't know about. His plans make me very worried about your safety, sir. Cobra believed in Luke's loyalty and accepted Luke's words. He gently sketched the shadows of the mountains with the brush in his hand. His slightly tightened eyes contained an extremely cold and gloomy smile. You're not wrong. He did use you and Xia. But now that you've returned safely, we should go. I'm very safe now. I won't give him another chance to plot against me. This time, I'm sorry, Luke. I was too anxious to establish a cooperative relationship with him and the Myanmar military behind him. I didn't notice his conspiracy in time. He apologized very sincerely. With his current tone, no one would believe that he had told his bodyguards before. If Xia Jinyuan and Luke were being watched closely by the Chinese side, he would send someone to kill them for his own safety. Luke whispered a few more words and repeatedly mentioned that if it weren't for Xia Jinyuan, they wouldn't have come back alive. Cobra, who was ready to wash the brush, nodded and praised Xia Jinyuan's performance. Before ending the call, Cobra casually asked Luke, "Have you been with Xia all this time?" "Yes, sir. We've been together all this time. I propose to run away separately." Xia reminded me that if we ran away separately, if something really happened, the other person wouldn't be able to rescue us in time. Only then did Cobra end the call, a joyful smile appearing on his thin face. They've been together all this time. Both of them were very capable, and he believed that they would be able to escape. Next, it was time to have a good chat with Qin Mong Sane, this not-so-sincere friend of his. The people around Cobra all relaxed. Their boss finally smiled and let them put away the drawing board. V8 and the rest who had already infiltrated the border had been paying attention to everything. They saw Cobra carrying a drawing board and painting gloomily. They also saw him laughing when he received the call. He then asked his subordinates to put away the drawing board and return to the wooden house. Then, the bodyguard beside him looked around vigilantly before returning to the wooden house together. When the bodyguard looked around, V8 immediately hid behind a tree. It was only when there were only two bodyguards outside the wooden house that he let out a sigh of relief. Q King's reminder was really important. It let them know how cautious Cobra was. Fortunately, they chose to watch from afar. If they were to watch from a close distance, they might have been discovered by the people around Cobra. To prevent being discovered by Cobrav, V8 and the rest didn't communicate much. They just watched silently the whole time and waited for Xia Jinyuan to return. Qin Mong Sane didn't have time to chat with Cobra. He came back from Myanmar's commander Min Lai's army and began to plan to negotiate with the Chinese Drug Enforcement Police. Chapter 3899. If he wanted the Chinese Armed Police to agree, he had to first let the Chinese Armed Police know that he had their missing female soldiers. When Qin Mongsane returned to his hiding place, he first ordered his subordinates to take photos of the 3 female soldiers being tied up and send them to the Chinese side to see how the Chinese side would react. Take off the hoods and let them take photos while kneeling. Hold the guns to their heads and tell the Chinese Armed Police that if they don't cooperate, the 3 female soldiers can forget about returning to China alive. In order to get the drugs seized by the Chinese Armed Police as soon as possible, Qin Mongsane used this arrangement as a warning to the Chinese side. Yi Qian and the other 2 female soldiers who were locked up in the dungeon were quickly dragged out. Their legs were tied up and they couldn't walk normally, so they were dragged out of the dungeon. Yi Qian didn't struggle. Her face, which was covered by the hood, was exceptionally cold. Where are they going to take them? What were they going to do? What about Zhou Yijin and the female soldier Lu Lu? Would they be separated from her? Yi Qian didn't even have time to worry about herself. She placed all her focus on Zhou Yijin and Lu Lu. Then, she heard Lu Li's fearful cries as she struggled, and Zhou Yijin's low, muffled cries. When she heard their cries, Yi Qian's heart felt a lot more at ease. They didn't just drag her out, they dragged the 2 of them out as well. Yi Qian, who couldn't walk with her legs, left 2 drag marks on the ground as she was dragged along. She felt that there were at least 10 people walking beside her, and she also smelled the smell of gun maintenance machine oil. They carried guns and dragged them out. Yi Qian, who didn't know where her leg hit, felt her heart skip a beat. Were they going to shoot the hostages? No, that shouldn't be the case. They hadn't negotiated with the Chinese side and hadn't made their demands. It was unlikely that they would directly shoot the hostages. If they really wanted to shoot the hostages, they wouldn't have waited until now. They would have done it when they kidnapped Yi Qian and the female soldier Lu Lu. It was obvious that Qin Mongsane didn't plan to use the most bloody method to confront the Chinese side right from the start. If they really dared to shoot the Chinese soldiers, the Chinese side would definitely send troops to assassinate them. Qin Mongsane knew the Chinese side's strength. They wouldn't dare to be so arrogant. After careful consideration, Yi Qian calmed down a lot. The surroundings were not very quiet. Some people were talking loudly, and some were laughing wildly. Wherever they went, they could hear dong-dong sounds. That was the sound of gun butts hitting wooden planks. When the female soldier Lu Lu heard the laughter, she felt as if she was surrounded by a group of wild beasts that could eat her at any time. She had nowhere to run, and all the fear in the depths of her heart surged wildly. She began to cry. Her cries reached the ears of the Burmese people who were dragging her away, causing them to laugh even more arrogantly. They laughed viciously, and Lu Lu became even more scared. Soon, the 3 of them were dragged into a wooden hut. They heard the other party say in stiff Mandarin, "Stand still." Before they could catch their breaths, something slammed into their knees and forced Yi Qian and the other 2 female soldiers to kneel on the ground. The hood was suddenly removed. Yi Qian's eyes, which had adapted to the darkness for a long time, were blinded by the light in the wooden hut. Yi Qian, who was trying to size up her surroundings, squinted her eyes. After a haze of colorful lights, she could finally see things around her clearly. Chapter 3900. It was nighttime when they got off the boat, and now it was daytime. Yi Qian's eyes adjusted to the darkness and quickly looked around. From the distance, they were dragged to the sound of something hitting the ground. She knew that they were in a house built on a foundation. She quickly looked around the wooden house, and Yi Qian focused her attention on the Burmese men with guns in the room. There were 4 Burmese men with guns in front of her. Their eyes were fierce, but they were staring at them coldly. There were 2 men with guns guarding the door to prevent them from escaping. Perhaps they were used to standing guard. No wonder people said that there were many retired soldiers in the Burmese drug cartel. From their habit of standing guard, it was obvious that the rumors were true. Yi Jian didn't have much time to check out her surroundings. She looked away from the guards at the door and immediately turned her head to look to her side. She saw two Burmese men standing on the right with guns pointed at her. At the same time, she saw two female soldiers in the same military uniform. They were Zhou Yijin and Lu Lu, who were also tied up and kneeling on the ground. Zhou Yijin was relatively calm. Her eyes were slightly red and swollen, and her complexion was a little pale, but she was in a good condition. Lu Li's condition was worse. Her eyes were red and swollen, and her face was haggard. She was forced to kneel down by the gun, and her whole body was trembling. It was obvious that she was very scared, and her mental state was on the verge of collapse. If they didn't save her in time, Lu might have a problem. Zhou Yijin also looked at Yi Qian. Their eyes met, and they couldn't help but purse their lips. Obviously, Zhou Yijin also noticed that Lu Li's condition was very bad. Yi Qian and Zhou Yijin both turned to look at the door at the same time. They saw a Burmese woman walking in with a camera in her hand. It was Dan E. The woman with the camera was called Dan E. She pretended to be a pregnant woman and was very rude to Yi Qian. She punched and kicked her from time to vent her anger. As soon as she came in, her hateful gaze swept across the faces of the three Chinese female soldiers. She said a few words coldly to the armed men in the room. Then, the back of the three people's heads was directly hit by a cold and hard object, and it was firmly pressed against them. It was a gun against their heads. When Danny saw that the three Chinese female soldiers were being held by their own men's guns, she tightened her grip on the camera. If she could, she would rather change the camera to a gun. She would definitely pretend that the gun had gone off by accident and use the bullets to blow up their heads. Dan E., who hated the Chinese soldiers to the core, took out his camera. Yi Jian, on the other hand, was not afraid at all. The appearance of the camera calmed her down. They wanted to use the photos to threaten the Chinese soldiers and achieve their goal. After a few clicks, Yi Qian's calm gaze fixed on the camera. He was going to send the photos to the Chinese border police. When Lu saw that he was only taking photos of her, her extremely tense nerves relaxed in an instant. At that moment, her entire person collapsed, and tears flowed out of her eyes like beads. If it weren't for the fact that her mouth was stuffed with something to block her voice, she probably would have cried out loud. Zhou Yijin, who was relatively calm, also relaxed her tense back. Chapter 39:01. After taking the photos, Dan E. did not leave immediately. Instead, she said a few words unwillingly to the men who dragged Yi Qian and the girls out of the dungeon. As she spoke, her gaze swept over the three Chinese female soldiers. The words that came out of her mouth seemed to have been squeezed out from between her teeth. They were cold and twisted. When the men heard this, they all nodded to show that they understood. When she left, Dan Yi's gaze was filled with hatred. She glared at the three Chinese female soldiers with a deeper meaning before she left with the camera in her hand. Her departure caused Lu Li's tensed body to instantly go limp. She felt that she had escaped another disaster. No one cared about the female soldiers' tears. After taking the photos, they quickly put the balaclavas over the three of their heads and used the same barbaric method to drag them back to the dungeon. As the metal door was slammed shut, Lu collapsed to the ground as if all the strength in her body had been sucked out. Her heavy breathing could be heard from the dungeon. Yi Qian moved closer to her and comforted Lu silently with his body. He told her not to be afraid and that everything would pass. Zhou Yijin also moved closer to Lu and comforted her by squeezing her. Perhaps the comforting words of a comrade worked. Lu, who had been trembling all over, finally relaxed. Gradually, her body stopped moving and even the sound of her breathing stopped. Her calmness allowed Yi Qian's tense heart to relax for a moment. His finger wrote stroke by stroke on the back of Lu Li's hand. Afraid that she would not know what he wrote, Yi Qian wrote very, very slowly. He wrote one word at a time on the back of Lu Li's hand so that she could relax even more. I will protect you. Don't be afraid. After writing this sentence, Yi Qian wrote another sentence. Our people are still outside. We will definitely return to the base safely. Yi Qian took at least 10 minutes to write 30 words. Lulu could not guess every word, but she could guess more than half of it. It was enough to dispel most of the fear in her heart. After about 10 minutes, someone brought in water and bread. They did not give Yi Qian and the girls any slack. They only took off the balaclavas and forced them to eat. They said the word eat in a hoarse voice. Yi Qian, who did not know how long he had been hungry, did not reject the water and bread that was stuffed into his mouth. Even if the bread was filled with fine sand and mud, Yi Qian ate it bite by bite. Yi Qian did not waste any of the bread and water that was filled with sand and mud. However, Zhou Yijin and Lu Lu did not. After Zhou Yijin had a mouthful of bread, Zhou Yijin's face turned green, while Lu Lu, hearing the sound of vomiting, Yi Jian, whose mouth was full of bread, only managed to say the word eat. Before she could say anything else, she was punched in the stomach. The Burmese man who fed her bread threatened her in stiff and strange Mandarin. Don't talk. Shut up. Otherwise, I will starve you to death. He used a lot of strength in his punch. The pain instantly spread from his abdomen. It seemed to affect all the nerves in his body. It was so painful that Yi Qian's back arched. She did not speak again. She could not speak anymore. The man had brutally stuffed the bread into her mouth. Even chewing was difficult, let alone speaking. Zhou Yijin was furious that Yi Jian was beaten up. She knew that she had implicated Yi Jian. Seeing this, no matter how much she didn't want to eat it, it was obvious that someone had stepped on it and crushed the originally soft bread into a flatbread. She held back her vomit and swallowed the bread into her throat. Chapter 3902. Every time Zhou Yijin swallowed, she felt as if her throat was being cut by a knife. Ever since she was born, she had never eaten anything with mud or sand in it. She had never even eaten food that had fallen to the ground. But today, not only did she swallow the bread that they had deliberately flattened with their feet, she also swallowed the dirty water that they had deliberately added mud to. She did not waste a single mouthful of water. Lulu was originally unable to swallow a single mouthful of bread, but Yi Qian being beaten up made her feel both afraid and angry. The courage in her bones was stimulated just like that. With tears streaming down her face, she bit down on the bread that had been flattened and swallowed it without chewing. As she vomited and swallowed, she could still eat a little. When Yi Qian saw Lulu vomiting until her face was pale, but she still forced herself to finish the bread, she, who was originally worried that Lulu might not be able to hold on, was relieved. No matter how delicate and afraid she was, Lulu was still a Chinese soldier. Chinese soldiers had a courage that would never lower their heads. How could Lulu be defeated so easily? Of course not. Yi Qian did not waste a single drop of water in the cup, as these people laughed wildly. They might be laughing now, but when the time was right, they would cry. Moreover, she had to thank these people for not adding their urine into the water. After eating bread and drinking water, these people did not put the hood over their heads again, nor did they gag their mouths again. They got up and left the dungeon. Without the hood, they could see each other and comfort each other in their eyes, encouraging each other to get through this difficult time together. Among the three of them, Yi Qian was actually the youngest. However, Yi Qian was a reincarnated person and had experienced so many things. In addition, she came here to save them, so she naturally became their spiritual support. Looking at the two of them, Yi Qian's eyes revealed a warm and determined smile. When Zhou Yijin and Lu saw her smile, it was like the sun shining through the darkness, bringing light. The two of them laughed at the same time. Believe me, everything will pass. Yi Qian spoke softly. She did not speak Mandarin, but the dialect of the southern province. Luli's hometown was adjacent to the southern province, so she could definitely understand it. Zhou Yijin graduated from the Southern Province University, so she could speak the Southern Province dialect. As soon as Yi Qian spoke, she could understand. Lulu, who also understood, burst into tears. Her cheeks were hurting, and her mouth had been stuffed with something. Other than eating once a day, the rest of the time, her mouth was stuffed with a piece of cloth that she didn't know where it came from. At this moment, even her chin was hurting. Tears streamed down her face like rain. She wanted to laugh, but as soon as she opened her mouth, the pain in her chin made her smile instantly distort her facial expression. As a result, her originally delicate facial features looked somewhat comical. Zhou Yijin, who was relatively calm, saw this and couldn't help but laugh out loud. When she laughed like this, Lu Li's tears also stopped. She wanted to laugh as well, but the pain in her jaw made it impossible for her to smile normally. Lulu could only grit her teeth and laugh very strangely. The two of them laughed, and the smile in Yi Qian's eyes deepened. Captives were not scary. As long as their minds were not damaged, there was always hope for them to escape. Just like when Case 7 was captured, he suffered much worse than they were now. Chapter 3903. Insults and beatings happened every day. There was physical torture and mental torture, but Case 7 endured it all. In the end, he was rescued by his comrades. He believed that as long as he persevered, his comrades would definitely come to rescue him. Similarly, she hoped that Yijin and Lu would believe in the words she wrote on their palms when she first came in. "Don't be afraid. I'm here to save you. I'll definitely bring you back to your country." This was her promise. It was a promise that she would fulfill. Lula didn't really believe that Yi Qian would be able to save them, but now she believed in him. She looked into his dark eyes that were filled with determination and a smile. The world in his eyes was so vast and green. It allowed her to see the sun and the hope of survival. Just one look was enough for her to believe in him. The three of them encouraged each other and ignored the panic from before. They just sat in the dungeon like this. Even if they didn't say a word, just a glance was enough to give each other enough warmth. Meanwhile, the photos of the three of them being forced to kneel with the butt of a gun had already been developed and sent to Qin Maosheng. At around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the photos were sent to Qin Mongsane, who was only a mountain away from the village where Yi Qian and the others were imprisoned. Qin Mongsane, who received the photos, nodded with satisfaction. Not bad. The photos were taken exactly as he wanted. In order to show his strength, Qin Mongsane invited Cobra, who was waiting for Xia Jinyuan and Luke to come over. When the photos were sent to Cobra, he looked at the three female soldiers in the photos. His gaze landed on the left side of the photo. There was a female soldier with short hair and stubborn eyes. His eyes narrowed slightly. This Chinese female soldier clearly looked much calmer than the other two. That kind of calmness made him want to viciously torture her. He wanted to tear apart her calm facade and see if she was truly calm deep down. Often, torturing this kind of stubbornness would give him a greater sense of accomplishment. Cobra, who loved to break other people's willpower, didn't refuse Qin Maosheng's invitation to show off his strength. He handed the photo back to Qin Maosheng, raised his eyebrows, and said with a smile, "Your invitation makes me feel very honored, but I want to wait for my two subordinates to come back before going together." Qin Mongsane's smile froze for a few seconds. Two subordinates? Could it be the two who went to China and attracted the attention of the Chinese armed police? They returned from China to Myanmar so quickly? Or was he wrong? Of course, we have a lot of time anyway. In order to confirm that he wasn't wrong, Qin Mongsane immediately probed. He pretended to casually ask, "Two subordinates? Mr. Cobra, you still have subordinates?" "Yes, Luke and Xia Jinyuan have already sneaked back to Myanmar. Now, I still need your help to bring them back." Qin Mongsane's pupils constricted a little. Who was Cobra, who escaped from the Chinese armed police's steel guns so quickly? He couldn't find much information on him. Qin Mongsane, who quickly covered up the shock in his heart, laughed and immediately nodded in agreement to Cobra's request. He liked to interact with this kind of adventurous guy. It made him feel very interesting. Qin Mong and Sheng Yushi thought that Cobra also liked it very much. Chapter 3904. Cobra, who was in someone else's territory, was not worried about encountering any danger along the way, nor was he worried that he would be killed by Qin Mong Sane because General Min Lai appreciated him. A cunning guy would not do anything that would annoy his own protection. He had now clearly expressed his intentions. If Qin Mong Sane really had the intention to cooperate with him, then they would definitely send someone to pick up Luke and Xia. A cunning and smart guy knew that since he could not do anything that would annoy his own protection, then he might as well deal with the cooperation properly and convince his protection that he had the ability to make more money. Of course, this was not the reason why he agreed to go with them to see how the Chinese female soldiers were treated. The real reason was that he wanted to know how much capital Qin Mong Sane had that they dared to kidnap a soldier from a peaceful country. Even he, Cobra, didn't dare to do it, but he actually did it. It was really interesting. So interesting that he wanted to see how much this bold and arrogant guy had. However, whether this guy had a lot of money or not, he believed that he would have nothing in the near future. Why? Because no country could tolerate their own soldiers being kidnapped by a gang leader from a small country and used to threaten them. Qin Mong Sane dared to do this, so they had to bear the consequences of angering a country. What would the consequences of angering a country be? Cobra could not help but laugh. He had already imagined what kind of ending would await Qin Mong Sane. He nodded without thinking and agreed to go with them to take a look. He also wanted to see the last moments of Qin Mong Sane. In the future, it would be up to him to accept the business dealings between Qin Mong Sane and General Min Lai. He believed that with General Min Lai's appetite, he would definitely establish a long-term cooperation with him. Qin Mong Sane had no idea what Cobra was thinking. He quickly sent a jeep to pick up Xia Jinyuan and Luke, who were not far from them. His straightforwardness made Cobra very satisfied. She waited for Luke and Xia's two most capable subordinates to return with peace of mind. Cobra's calmness and Xia Jinyuan's and Luke's ability to end the battle quickly made Qin Mong Sane wary of Cobra. He didn't dare to act rashly. This was the effect that Cobra wanted. He wanted to let the other party know that he was not someone who could be easily manipulated. It was best to maintain a sincere heart and cooperate with him happily. Otherwise, he really couldn't guarantee that he wouldn't send his bodyguards to secretly kill a guy who wasn't sincere in cooperating. Qin Mong Sane, who couldn't immediately leave, kept in touch with his subordinates who were guarding the 3 Chinese female soldiers to confirm that everything was normal. Cobra listened the whole time and nodded at the other party's meticulous arrangements. This was a very vigilant partner, which would save him a lot of trouble. He liked to work with people who didn't trouble him, because it would make the whole business process happy and safe. If the Chinese side didn't take action against Qin Mong Sane this time, he was very willing to cooperate with the other party. If the Chinese side destroyed Qin Mong Sane, then sorry, there would be such an ending. He wouldn't feel sorry for Qin Mong Sane. His old friend once said in Chinese, "The winner is the king, the loser is the bandit." If Qin Mong Sane was really destroyed by the Chinese side, he wouldn't suffer any losses since he was already in contact with Burmese General Min Lai. Chapter 39:05. While Cobra waited for Xia Jinyuan and Luke to return, he asked his men to keep an eye on their surroundings. He did not want to provoke the Chinese armed forces before he left. The bodyguards were instructed to keep a close eye on their surroundings. From time to time, they would find a vantage point and secretly use binoculars to observe the entire village and the nearby mountains. When the perfectly disguised V8 and the others saw this, they did not dare move rashly. They maintained their current posture and remained motionless. Even if insects and ants burrowed into their clothes and bit them, they would still maintain their original posture. G3 and the others, who had long known that Xia Jinyuan would take a car to the village where V8 and the others were hiding, took a shortcut to their destination and tried to meet up with V8 and the others as soon as possible. At around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, a few photos of the Chinese female soldiers being forced to kneel with their hands and feet tied appeared in Suyu's hands. The photos were clipped to a newspaper and handed to the armed police at the checkpoint by a child. Finally, they were handed to Suyu. Even though the photos were in Suyu's hands, The members of the Cloud Leopard Commando team, guarding outside, still did not see Qin Mongsane appear in the village where the female soldiers were being held. This made them suspect that their target might not come. If he still did not come, could they consider going directly to the village where Qin Mongsane was currently and killing him? The leader of the Cloud Leopard Commando team had just reported their current situation and his thoughts to the military, but the military immediately denied it. There's no need to adjust the battle strategy. Qin Mongsane can't appear for the time being because he's delayed by something. Be patient and wait. This was the military's answer to the Cloud Leopard Commando team that was currently guarding the village where Yi Qian and the others were being held. According to the report of another Special Forces team from the military, Qin Mongsane was still in the village and had no intention of heading to the village where the female soldiers were being held. On the other hand, Commander-in-Chief Xia had already arrived at the military and was sitting in the conference room with the military leaders. Once again, they made adjustments to the operation. The Cloud Leopard Commando team was temporarily on standby and continued to pay close attention to the situation. 3 of his family's juniors were trapped in the tiger's den at the same time. Commander-in-Chief Xia, who was far away in the capital, finished his work and took the earliest flight to Changshui Airport this morning. He arrived at the military zone around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. After that, he went to the border checkpoint with the leaders of the military region to meet with Su Yu from the Narcotics Division. While the Cloud Leopard Commandos who were guarding the village where the female soldiers were held were reporting their situation to their superiors, Commander-in-Chief Xia, who was sitting in the conference room, was holding a photo of the female soldier being forced to kneel with a gun pressed against her head. Looking at the photos taken from the front, left, and right angles, his face was so gloomy that the military leaders could not help but hold their breaths, their hearts in their throats. Commander-in-Chief Xia threw the photo in his hand onto the conference table and slapped it heavily. With a cold look in his eyes, he said sternly, "How lawless! Who gave them the guts to trample on the faces of our Chinese soldiers?" Even though he knew the purpose of Qin Mongsane kidnapping the female soldiers, Commander-in-Chief Xia was still furious the moment he saw the photo. He slammed the table angrily, and the entire conference room suddenly became so silent that even the sound of breathing could not be heard. How's the firepower of the Cloud Leopard Commando team? How far is the distance between the 2 villages where Qin Mongsane is located? How many people are there? So what if they have firepower? Is there an exact number? The only person who could break the oppressive silence was Commander-in-Chief Xia himself. Other than him, not many people dared to speak. Chapter 3906. The village where Qin Mongsane is currently located is his hiding place. It's very close to the Burmese troops that are protecting him. This is also why we want to wait for Qin Mongsane to arrive at the village where the female soldiers are being held before we make a move. They didn't want to attract close fire support from the Burmese troops. Furthermore, the village where the female soldiers were being held was more than 100 kilometers away from the troops that were protecting Qin Mongsane. Therefore, even if the Burmese troops wanted to reinforce Qin Mongsane, they wouldn't be able to arrive in time. This would increase the chances of China winning. To a large extent, they would be able to avoid any conflict with the Burmese troops. This would also avoid any possible conflicts between the 2 countries. Also, the village where the female soldiers are being held is a drug den. Its firepower isn't as good as the firepower of Qin Mongsane's village. If we make a move, our chances of winning will increase again. After reporting the approximate number of people and firepower in the 2 villages, the leader of Yin Province's military and Su Yu secretly exchanged a few glances. They felt that the commander-in-chief might make a big move. Commander-in-Chief Xia, indeed, wanted to make a big move. He wanted to use this to scare off the criminals who were secretly trying to harm the Chinese military. Right now, there were 2 special forces keeping an eye on the 2 villages of Qin Mongsane. One of the villages was his hiding place, and the other was a drug den. If you really looked at it carefully, the firepower of the 2 villages should be equal. Therefore, it wasn't realistic for the 2 special forces to attack the 2 villages separately. They could only focus on one village to increase the chances of our soldiers winning. It was fine if they didn't attack the village where Qin Mong Sane was hiding. Once the village where the drug was hidden was attacked, his hiding place would be exposed. An exposed hiding place would lose its purpose of hiding, and it would become an abandoned village. The Snowfield Brigade's special forces, including Qin Miao and Q King, had a total of 16 special forces members. The Cloud Leopard Commando team also had 14 special forces members. Therefore, a total of 30 special forces members were dispatched. Other than Qin Miao, who did not carry any powerful firearms or ammunition, the other 29 special forces members all carried lethal firearms and ammunition. 30 people against almost 200 people. Commander-in-Chief Xia pursed his lips. He had to ask the Cloud Leopard Commandos and the two teams of Snowfield Brigade Special Forces. Soon, the Cloud Leopard Commandos and the Snowfield Brigade's Special Forces, who were split into two groups, spoke directly to Commander-in-Chief Xia. With Commander-in-Chief Xia's questions, the atmosphere in the conference room became more and more tense. As expected, the Commander-in-Chief was really going to make a big move, so you could not help but clench his fists. If they could really do it, it would be equivalent to getting rid of a huge tumor and avenging the lives of the armed police soldiers who had sacrificed themselves. The two teams of Snowfield Brigade's special forces who were split into two clicked on the map of the drugs hideout sent by the Yun Province military. After a short and detailed discussion about the deployment, G3 said to his comrades, "Since all of you are confident, let's get started on this bandit extermination. Let's do it. Damn it. How dare they make Qin Miao and the others take pictures while kneeling? If we don't teach them a lesson, who knows how arrogant they'll become." T6 said with a fierce gaze. The rifles in his hands were ready to fight alongside him, and they were just waiting for the battle to start. They were all wearing the military uniforms of a ragtag army. After entering Myanmar, they had no status at all. If something really happened, even if the Myanmar side knew it was the Chinese side who did it, they would not be able to make it public. Chapter 3907. They kidnapped a Chinese female soldier with the support of their own country's troops. Did they want to be condemned by other countries? The G3 comrades had no objections and did as they were told. V8 and the others had no objections either. If these drug dealers dared to kidnap a Chinese soldier today, what about in the future? Would they be able to swagger into Chinese territory and kidnap a Chinese citizen? Those were the people they protected with their lives. How could they be threatened? Today, they even dare to trample on the dignity of Chinese soldiers? What about in the future? No, there was no need to wait for the future. This was what they were doing today. In order to get the Chinese side to agree to their conditions, the arrogant drug dealers had already trampled on the dignity of a country. This was a battle for dignity and for the strength of the country. At the same time, they replied to Commander-in-Chief Xia that they could. The members of the Cloud Leopard Commandos, who had seen how the Chinese female soldier was dragged out of the dungeon, were already furious. After a short call with the Commander-in-Chief, the team made a request to see if they could establish a wireless communication with their comrades from the other fraternal company. This required the communication technicians from both sides to take action. Commander-in-Chief Xia agreed to the Cloud Leopard Commando's request. The two different wireless communication systems started to be tested and established. Just as the technicians from both sides were busy establishing a wireless communication system, the members of the Cloud Leopard Commandos started to deploy their troops. There's also our brothers from the other special forces. The Commander-in-Chief just said that their combat ability is top-notch in the country and can compete with the Western Special Forces. He has already told us that their firepower is very strong. We have 14 people on our side. Then we'll guard this place and send 4 people to sneak into the village and kill their machine gunners. The members of the Cloud Leopard Commandos, who had been guarding this place for dozens of hours, were in charge of this assault. They were more familiar with the terrain in this area than the members of the Snowfield Brigade. They also knew where the heavy firepower was in advance, so they were the most suitable to be in charge of the assault. Meanwhile, the special forces of the Snowfield Brigade would fight on the periphery to ensure the safety of the Cloud Leopard commandos who were in charge of the assault. Soon, the special forces of the Snowfield Brigade and the electronic communicators of the Cloud Leopard commandos successfully established wireless communication between the two troops through the relay station. After debugging, the soldiers of the two different troops could hear each other's conversation. This was also the first time they had spoken to each other after knowing each other's existence. There wasn't much communication between the two sides, and it was impossible for them to maintain communication for a long time. Although anti-interference was established, it was still better to be careful. G3 was still taking the shortcut to Cobra's village, while V8 was waiting for Xia Jinyuan's arrival. Through the binoculars, V8 saw that the jeep that had driven out of the village had returned to the village. After hearing from G3 that Q King would take a car back to the village, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. All of our targets have appeared. How far are you from us? V8 saw Xia Jinyuan get out of the car through the binoculars and asked G3, who were still on their way, if they plan to go to the village where the female soldiers are. They will probably make arrangements today. Xia Jinyuan and Luke finally met up with Cobra. Knowing that they had returned by car, Cobra especially came out to welcome them. When she saw Luke push open the car door and jump out, Cobra went up to him and hugged Luke tightly. Good job, Luke. You didn't disappoint me. Cobra laughed out loud. Behind her, the sun that was hidden in the clouds was dim and gray. It shone on her thin face. Although there was a smile on her face, there was always a hint of coldness, like a venomous snake. Chapter 3908. Then Xia Jinyuan jumped out of the car and walked over. Cobra looked over Luke's shoulder and stopped at his face. At this moment, the smile on Cobra's face was brighter than ever. Xia, you're the brother I admire the most. Your safe return can finally make my heart feel at ease. Compared to Luke, Cobra showed more trust in Xia Jinyuan. He even regarded Xia Jinyuan as his brother. If calling him brother could get him a capable subordinate, and a very loyal and capable subordinate at that, Cobra felt that it was a good deal. What he needed was not a brother, but more loyal and capable subordinates. Xia Jinyuan didn't say too much. When Cobra said that he was his brother, there was excitement in his eyes, but he quickly covered it up. There was only a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. He said calmly, I'm also very happy. Glancing at the subordinates of Qin Mong Sane nearby, Xia Jinyuan said again, it seems that they are quite honest. His words were very simple, as if he didn't say anything, but the smile in Cobra's eyes deepened. He understood what his capable subordinate wanted to say. If they were not honest, then my safety would be a problem. Now that you and Luke have returned safely, and I am safe, we are all safe now. Cobra gently patted the shoulder of the subordinate he admired very much. It could be seen that his trust in Xia Jinyuan had increased. Seeing this, Luke kept a smile at the corner of his mouth. He seemed to be happy that Xia Jinyuan had gained Cobra's trust. Qin Mong Sane, who had been waiting for Xia Jinyuan and Luke to come back, had been waiting for his subordinates to pick them up. The two people who escaped back to Myanmar were not even slightly injured. How did they escape from the hands of the Chinese anti-drug police? If the two subordinates who were sent out to do things were so powerful, what about the subordinates who had been staying by Cobra's side? Wouldn't they be even more powerful? Qin Mong Sane had a deeper fear of Cobra's strength, and at the same time, he was more vigilant. He had to prevent Cobra from bypassing him and contacting General Minlai privately. Qin Mong Sane, with a haze in his eyes, stepped out of the wooden house. When he saw several figures coming in front of him, a warm smile immediately appeared on his dark brown face. He walked down the steps of the wooden house in a few steps. Before he arrived, his voice was already loud and clear. Thank God for your blessing. Let us all look forward to your safe return. He laughed and spoke as he walked quickly. His expression swept away the haze in the room. Without waiting for Luke's words, he opened his arms and gave Luke a hug. Without waiting for Luke's reply, Luke acted as if he didn't know anything and played along with the other party's act. Yes, thank God that my brother and I escaped successfully and came back alive to see Mr. Cobra. Jean, how are you? I haven't seen you for a few days. You seem very happy. Are you happy that we came back alive? Ah, yes. I am very happy that you came back alive. I know that my subordinates have picked you and your brothers up. I have already prepared champagne to celebrate the success of our first cooperation. That's great. In order to come back early, I was really tired. Now I just need a little stimulation of alcohol to give me the energy to continue standing and talking to you. In terms of social interaction, Luke seemed to be better than Cobra. Chapter 3909. Cobra also intended to let Luke speak up for him. Seeing this, not only did he not stop it, but he was also very supportive. Hearing this, he couldn't help but tease Qin Mong, saying, Luke likes to drink very much, and he's very good at it. If you only prepare a bottle of champagne or one type of wine, Luke will definitely be very disappointed. Ha ha, of course there's more than one type of wine. I have everything you want to drink here. Qin Mong Sane let go of Luke's arm and turned to look at Xia Jinyuan. Qin Mong Sane was much less enthusiastic towards this man, who was obviously from Asia. This man's facial features were too similar to a Chinese man's, and he was not used to the cold aura on him. He always felt that he was looking at a cold sword that could fall on his neck at any time. He did not like Asian men who gave him such a feeling from the bottom of his heart. Xia Jinyuan saw Qin Mong Sane's indifference at a glance. Seeing him walk over, he simply took a step back from Cobra and used practical actions to tell Qin Mong Sane that they were the same, so there was no need to disgust each other. Cobra liked Xia Jinyuan's honest and unpretentious reaction very much. He even wanted a block for Xia Jinyuan and said, Let's hurry up and celebrate. We have more important things to do, don't we? There are more important things to do. Xia Jinyuan, who was standing next to Cobra, lowered his eyes slightly. What more important things to do? Xia Jinyuan didn't take Qin Mong Sane's important things to heart. He tried to minimize contact with the outside world, so he didn't drink champagne with Luke to celebrate his safe return with the excuse that he needed to wash up. Cobra and Luke had long been used to his solitary nature, so they didn't force him. They happily let him go and said with concern, You can even take a good rest before coming out. Xia Jinyuan didn't take a good rest. When he came out in a clean and tidy military uniform, he knew what the more important things were. Kidnapping a Chinese female soldier. My God, I'm really shocked by Qin Mong Sane's courage. He actually dared to kidnap a Chinese soldier. After I saw the strength of the Chinese border police and heard that he kidnapped a Chinese soldier, Xia, I really admire his courage now. Luke, who reeked of alcohol, stuffed the entire champagne bottle into Xia Jinyuan's hands. His tone and expression didn't hide his shock at what Qin Mong Sane had done. Is he planning to fight with the entire Chinese army? Although our Mr. Cobra has kidnapped regular government troops before, he has never made a move on soldiers from non-war-torn countries. He only challenges war-torn countries and will not make a move on soldiers from war-torn countries for the sake of 1 or 2 government troops sacrificed. Qin Mong Sane actually did it. Even Mr. Cobra wouldn't do something like that. Xia, I'm still in shock. I'm really in shock. Luke used his body language and tone of voice to express his shock. Xia Jinyuan was calm on the surface as he faced this shocking news that came so suddenly. A Chinese female soldier was kidnapped. A mafia boss in Myanmar actually dared to kidnap a Chinese female soldier? Did the Chinese already know? Did they already have a rescue plan? Why did he kidnap a Chinese female soldier? Xia Jinyuan, who was calm on the surface but had a heavy heart, asked faintly, What does he want to do by kidnapping a Chinese female soldier? Is he going to fight against the entire Chinese armed forces? Or is it just to provoke the dignity of a country? Chapter 3910. Luke felt that Xia Jinyuan had hit the nail on the head, and he couldn't help but laugh. Ha ha ha, an enemy of a country's armed forces? Mr. Qin Mong Sane doesn't have the guts to do that. He kidnapped the Chinese female soldier because he wanted to make a deal with the Chinese anti-drug police. Ha ha ha. You don't understand, do you? That's right, that's what he thought. So he did it. Ha ha ha, my God. I still can't believe what I just heard. I don't think he even thought that kidnapping a country soldier is a challenge to the dignity of a country. The champagne is good. Let's have a drink to celebrate our survival. Xia Jinyuan shook his big belly full of champagne and raised his head. His sexy Adam's apple and neck straightened, forming a cold and stiff curve. He gulped down a mouthful of champagne while his Adam's apple moved. He needed a little alcohol to suppress the sadness in his heart. After finishing the glass in one gulp, Xia Jinyuan clinked the champagne bottle in Luke's hand. Luke chuckled and drank 2 mouthfuls. He put down the champagne bottle and wiped the wine from the corner of his mouth. He said, "Poor guy. I think he'll end up very badly." Mr. Cobra didn't want to remind him because of what? Luke didn't say it out loud. He leaned close to Xia Jinyuan and said very softly, "It's because Mr. Cobra wanted to cooperate with General Minlai alone." Later, Mr. Cobra will tell you why he didn't remind Qin Mong Sane. Kidnapping a Chinese female soldier to threaten the Chinese anti-drug police to make a deal with the Chinese anti-drug police. Qin Mong Sane, who gave you the guts to do that? Xia Jinyuan clenched the champagne bottle by the neck. The frost in his eyes gradually covered, making him look even more handsome and cold, like pine trees covered with white snow, cold and stern. Luke gently touched Xia Jinyuan's shoulder again and whispered, he even dared to kidnap a female soldier. No wonder he could talk so freely with Mr. Cobra. It turns out that he and Mr. Cobra are the same kind of people. They even dared to kidnap a government soldier. What do you think the Chinese side will do when they find out? Would they directly send people to destroy the bold Qin Mong Sane? If someone from the Chinese side really came, wouldn't Mr. Cobra be in danger? His words made the corners of Xia Jinyuan's eyes twitch. He did not know if the Chinese side had sent anyone to rescue the female soldiers, but his comrades from the Snowfield Brigade must have arrived. Faced with the kidnapped female soldiers, it seemed that he had to adjust his plan. The priority should be to save the female soldiers. It had been 53 hours since Yi Qian was kidnapped. The laughter in the wooden house was no longer confined to the house. As the laughing people walked out, the laughter could be heard even more clearly. Xia Jinyuan put the bottle aside and looked up. His gaze fell on the tall and short figures walking out side by side. The tall one was Cobra, and the short one was Qin Mong Sane, a guy who dared to kidnap a Chinese soldier. Xia Jinyuan's gaze swept past Qin Mong Sane's face. When he retracted his gaze, he inadvertently met Qin Mong Sane's eyes. Their eyes met for a brief moment before they calmly looked away. The way your subordinate looked at me just now, it seemed like he wanted to kill me, Qin Mong Sane said, half jokingly and half seriously. When he looked at Xia Jinyuan again, his gaze was very unfriendly. When Cobra heard this, he smiled and said to his subordinate who had been in charge of translating, "Tell him he's thinking too much." Xia Jinyuan has always looked at him like that. Please don't misunderstand. He misunderstood and thought that Xia Jinyuan's intention to kill Qin Mong Sane was because he was plotting against him. Chapter 39:11. Xia Jinyuan, who found out about the kidnapping of the Chinese female soldier, wanted to kill Qin Mong Sane. Once again, he pleased Cobra. This was something that even Xia Jinyuan did not expect. Qin Mong Sane still had some small matters to deal with. They agreed to leave at 6 o'clock sharp for the village where the Chinese female soldier was. As soon as he left, Cobra and Xia Jinyuan started chatting. "He schemed against you, which is equivalent to him scheming against me. We don't need to be too kind to a business partner who hasn't started working with us yet. Did Luke tell you where we need to go tonight? I admire his courage. He actually dared to kidnap a soldier from a peaceful country. Right now, I think all the initiative is in the hands of the Chinese side. Let's put it this way. I previously told you that I wanted to go to the Chinese side to meet an old friend. Now, I've changed my mind. I plan to first go with the bold Qin Mong Sane to see the kidnapped Chinese female soldier. I want to confirm whether he really did it. If he really did it, how will the Chinese side deal with it? Pretend that they don't know anything? Or secretly send troops to kill Qin Mong Sane? If the Chinese side chooses the former, then I can continue to go to the Chinese side. If the Chinese side chooses the latter and directly kills Qin Mong Sane, then all our previous plans will be canceled and we will return to China immediately. Tonight, we'll accompany him to take a look. Tomorrow morning, we'll leave this place where danger can descend at any time. As for the Chinese side, we can go and take a look next time. I heard that the Chinese side has a place called the Great Wall. The scenery there is very beautiful. Unfortunately, I planned to take a look before I left. If the Chinese side chooses to directly kill Qin Mong Sane, then I can only regretfully give up this time. It was rare for Cobra and Xia Jinyuan to talk so much. Other than the slight fluctuation in Xia Jinyuan's eyes when he said that he wanted to go and see if the Chinese female soldier was really kidnapped, everything else he said was indifferent. As for what he said about wanting to see the scenery of the Great Wall did not welcome him. He replied indifferently, "Understood." For more than a year, Xia Jinyuan had played the role of a man of few words. In the face of Cobra's trust, he didn't seem to feel anything. He nodded faintly, indicating that he understood and would follow the arrangement. His silence made Cobra pat him heavily on the shoulder, and the smile on her thin face deepened. Xia Jinyuan clenched his fists. He really hoped that Qin Mong Sane's plan for tonight would not change. That way, he would be able to go and see if it was really a Chinese female soldier. And it was now 5 o'clock, and there was still an hour before departure. He needed to inform his comrades who were hiding nearby. V8 saw Xia Jinyuan's gesture through the binoculars. He handed the binoculars to his comrades and said softly, "King Q asked me to go and look for him. You guys keep a close eye on him. I'll be back soon. Tell him about our plan of action while you're at it." Xia Jinyuan was free to move around, so it was easy for him to meet up with V8. It was only when he took the initiative to ask for a meeting and pointed out the meeting location that V8 and the others could meet up with him. "Are you going to tell King Q that Qing Niao is one of the kidnapped female soldiers?" V8, who was about to leave, pursed his lips after being reminded by his comrade. F***CK. I almost forgot about this. Should I F***King tell him or not? V8 came back and contacted G3. Should I tell him? Will it affect King Q? Chapter 39:12. Should I say it in advance? G3 paused for a moment before replying. Ask the higher-ups. If you can say it, then say it. If you can't, then don't say it for now. But I think I can say it. You must know that we still need to inform Q King of all our plans through Qing Niao. Tell him not to act alone. Since the Chinese female soldiers are kidnapped, we can assist him in completing his previous plan. There's no need to fight another battle. V8 contacted Major General Yang directly and received a reply that could have been directly communicated to Xia Jinyuan. V8 said, "Generals are not subject to military orders in foreign countries. As long as it's beneficial to the entire operation, you can make your own decisions. You don't have to ask your superiors at all times." There was no need to ask their superiors for any decision. The battlefield was their battlefield. They could do whatever was beneficial to the battlefield. As the generals in charge of the country, they just had to ensure that the big decision was not changed. With Major General Yang's approval, V8 felt more confident. The sun had already put away its last rays. The clouds on the horizon were dyed with a layer of gold. The sun had already set, and only the last rays of its light illuminated the earth. Gradually, the golden edges of the clouds became fainter. Night birds rushed into the clouds out of nowhere and disappeared in a few flaps of their wings. The sky gradually darkened. The distant mountains seemed to be covered by a thin layer of green gauze. The surroundings were silent. Only the rustling sound of the wind blowing through the treetops could be heard. V8 had already seen their captain, their king. After not seeing him for a year, V8 felt a little F***king excited. He was even more excited than when he saw his girlfriend. F***CK. I almost forgot that he didn't have a girlfriend yet. A few birds chirped softly, as if they were happily flapping their wings above the branches. Xia Jinyuan's footsteps moved slightly as he calmly walked into the mountains. Someone on patrol noticed him and glanced over. Half of his body was hidden in the forest, while his upper body was faintly discernible between the leaves. It looked a little like he was solving an urgent matter. They didn't pay much attention and left quickly. V8 was standing on the side of the tree where Xia Jinyuan could see. Their eyes met, and there was a smile in each other's eyes. Ever since Xia Jinyuan became the captain of the Snowfield Brigade, this was the second time he had not seen his comrades for a year. For the first time, his comrades did not miss their new captain. Now that they had gone through so many life and death battles together and had not seen each other for a year, their emotions were self-evident. V8's eyes were red. "Captain," he maintained a certain distance and stared fixedly at them. His voice was hoarse. Xia Jinyuan smiled and said, "Not bad. You didn't forget about me." "How would we dare to forget? Our brothers are all thinking about you and are all looking forward to your return. We are all waiting for you to come back and train us." V8 grinned, wrinkling his resolute face that was covered in camouflage paint. He wanted to have a good chat, but time didn't allow for it. Xia Jinyuan asked V8 to tell him how many of his comrades were there, whether all of them had arrived, and if there were any other arrangement from the military. V8 stopped wanting to chat and picked the most important things to tell Xia Jinyuan. He pursed his lips when he thought about what he had to say first. He even gave Xia Jinyuan a heads up. "Captain, the first thing I have to say is a little big. You have to be mentally prepared. Now, take a deep breath and stabilize yourself." Xia Jinyuan raised his eyebrows slightly and asked, "You want to tell me that 3 Chinese female soldiers have been kidnapped?" You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.